Chapter 45:10. After that, Shuji looked at Xiao Hua again and said earnestly, Xiao Hua, have you forgotten? Xingyue and I have already warned you. Some magical powers should not be revealed in front of others. Did you take it as a passing wind? Although we don't understand the magical power you just used, how can we not know what it is? Taboo power is the most taboo power in the immortal world. As long as there is a taboo power, the celestial venerables will hunt it down and eliminate it. I know you trust us, but we don't dare to trust ourselves. Who knows what kind of interrogation we will encounter when we return to the immortal world? Even if it's a soul search, it's normal. We can't guarantee that we won't reveal your secret. If this matter brings disaster to you, then you can only blame yourself. Shuji's words were very strict, but they were sincere and sincere. Xiao Hua seemed to see another helpless person standing in front of him and berating him. He straightened his face, bowed, and said, Yes, I understand. Thank you for your reminder, senior. In this world, there is no one you can absolutely trust. The coldness on Shuji's face lessened slightly, and he said, It's just that the price of betrayal is different. If the price is high enough, some people may even abandon the realm that gave birth to them. Yes, I've learned my lesson. Xiao Hua, of course, knew the care in Shuji's words. He didn't dare to straighten his back and answered respectfully. It's good that you know. You're just two. Shuji hesitated and stopped. He looked at the chaotic realm, and the aura gradually calmed down. He said, Forget it, let's not talk about this. The meteor belt seems to have changed. Let's wait a little longer. Okay. Xiao Hua agreed. In fact, he opened his illusion breaker eyes again and carefully observed the meteor belt. Fairy Xingyue watched Shuji berate Xiao Hua from the side. Her eyes showed a trace of confusion and a trace of complexity. At this time, the Xingyue palace had begun to bustle. Other than the 4 aristocratic families and some of the Confucian cultivators rushing to the meteor belt, the other Confucian cultivators and great demons of the demon clan also went to other places in the Xingyue palace. There were no traces of people outside the Xingyue palace. When the Xingyue palace moved again, even the starlight passage between the gate and the 1,000 demons sacred realm could not hold on. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. The entire starlight passage completely collapsed, and the passage was completely filled with chaotic storms. In just a moment, the starlight disappeared, and a powerful whirlwind in the interspace. The whirlwind blew out of the interlayer, scattering the power of the stars and the moon in the sky. Without the starlight passage, the Xingyue palace began to move faster. In the time it took to eat a meal, the huge aura within hundreds of thousands of miles was concealed in the void again. Boom! The moment the aura disappeared, the Chidi River, which had been split open by the Xingyue palace, let out a violent roar, and the river surged again. Furthermore, at the spot where the Xingyue palace had disappeared, the space within hundreds of thousands of miles seemed to have suddenly become completely empty. Endless qi of heaven and earth and noble qi surged in, forming a rare hurricane. Not only did the hurricane cause the wind and clouds to sway in the sky, but it also caused the Chidi River to surge with red waves. The waves surged violently, and the nearby mountain ranges were blown into flying sand and rolling stones, causing the forest to collapse. The previously bright starry sky was gone, and the hook-like crescent moon was even more desolate. Occasionally, it would appear in the gaps of the dark clouds. The moonlight was also scattered by the strong wind. The Xingyue palace appeared and disappeared again. It was unknown where it would appear again, and when it would appear again. Senior. Xiao Hua observed for a moment in front of the meteor belt and whispered, It's about time. I feel that the aura in this area has begun to calm down. If I'm not wrong, I've found some patterns. Shuji nodded. It's similar to my perception, but I'm not sure. Tell me, which spatial fragment should we fly to? Xiao Hua explained, Senior, I don't know which spatial fragment to fly to, but I know which spatial fragment has a stable aura. I understand. Fairy Xingyue nodded. According to our previous experience, there are currently 6 spatial fragments that we can enter. If there are other disciples, we will split into 6 groups and enter separately. Now that you can determine the stability of the spatial fragments, We don't have to test them one by one. Which 6 spatial fragments? Xiao Hua asked hurriedly. Fairy Xingyue raised her hand and pointed. She did not point at the few spatial fragments closest to Xiao Hua and the others. Instead, she pointed at 2 rectangular spatial fragments, 3 rectangular spatial fragments, and 1 6-star spatial fragment that was slightly further away. The 6-star spatial fragment was even further behind a pile of spatial fragments. Xiao Hua was stunned. He looked up at Fairy Xingyue and said, "It seems, Senior, you're not just relying on your experience." "Oh, is that so?" Fairy Xingyue shrugged and said, "I'm afraid you're mistaken. I didn't use any magical power. This is just my experience." Xiao Hua nodded. "Senior, you're right. I understand." Then, Xiao Hua pointed at the 6-star spatial fragment in the distance and said, "There's only 1 6-star spatial fragment within a dozen miles of the left. The 6-star spatial fragment is very magical. Any spatial fragment that collides with it will turn into 6 wisps of aura. These 6 wisps of aura are easy to balance with each other. Other shapes don't have this characteristic. I think this 6-star spatial fragment is safer." Xiao Hua only said that he was guessing and did not say what he had seen. Shuji's cold face relaxed slightly. He nodded and said, "According to our previous experience, the normal shapes, such as rectangular and square, are similar to the fragments of the 1,000 Demons' sacred realm. The strange line-like fragments are the fragments of the ancient desolation. The hexagonal, heptagonal, or other more complicated shapes should be similar to the fragments of the immortal world, the Demon League, and even the Dragon Realm. And according to our experience, the fragments with complicated shapes are usually at the back. We won't choose such a fragment for the first time." Fairy Xingyue added. Hearing Fairy Xingyue mention experience, Shuji looked up at her and smiled bitterly. It was just a little late. Their previous experience was already unreliable. What was the use of mentioning experience now? Haha, maybe there's a transmission channel in this fragment. Xiao Hua said optimistically. "Senior, how should we go in? Are we just going to fly in like that?" "Of course not. That's courting death." Fairy Xingyue shook her head and took out a magic weapon that looked like an astrolabe from her soft armor. She looked around and took a few steps sideways. Then, she looked around again and took 2 more steps forward. Xiao Hua noticed that there was a flame flashing in Fairy Xingyue's right eye. Although the flame had a strong aura of starlight, Xiao Hua could see clearly that there were also very few green threads of light in it. Forbidden power. Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes. He knew that Shuji was not exaggerating. In order to destroy the Tao, the immortals, Buddhas, and demons could join forces to wipe out the Tao sect cultivators from the 3 continents. Immortal Emperor Gaochen could also raise the Tao sect cultivators like dogs in the Penglai immortal realm. Since the immortals of the immortal world regarded soul cultivation as a taboo, they would definitely have more powerful and violent means to deal with matters related to soul cultivation. Then, why did the immortal world regard soul cultivation as a taboo power? Judging from the few traces of green seal script in Fairy Xingyue's cultivation method, which was similar to the immortal world's cultivation method, Xiao Hua knew that soul cultivation could connect heaven and earth and make ghosts and gods weep. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua could not help but send a voice transmission. "Senior, I still have a question that I want to ask you." Hearing Xiao Hua's voice transmission, Shuji frowned and said, "Since you shouldn't ask, then don't ask. Even if you ask, I won't answer." "Alas, I know I shouldn't ask. But the problem is, apart from you, I really can't find anyone in the 3 continents to ask." Xiao Hua said helplessly. "And you're the only person in the world that I can trust." "I've already told you that no one in the world can be trusted. Including me," Shuji replied mercilessly. However, Shuji thought for a moment and said, "If you think you have to ask, you can ask, but I can decide not to answer." "Okay." Xiao Hua nodded hurriedly. Looking at Fairy Xingyue, who was wandering in the starry sky, he asked, "I've seen the Devil World's Devil Emperor sacrifice millions of blood spirits. He wanted to borrow the souls of those blood spirits. I don't understand. What's the use of these souls? Of course, in our Daoist Dharma spells, Refining our natal Dharma treasures and cultivating the nascent soul out of the body also require the power of souls. I know this, but I don't understand. With so many souls, what kind of divine ability can you cultivate? You should ask the devil race this question. Shuji did not want to answer Xiao Hua's question. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. He himself had a demon lord's little brother, and this little brother was a pure demon clan's devil spirit. He also had the devil blade murder, but Xiao Hua was clear in his heart that the demon clan devoured souls and raised them based on their instincts. They really didn't know the true use of souls, or perhaps only a higher realm than the demon realm would know. Seeing Xiao Hua's bitter smile, Shuji seemed to be unable to bear it. He thought for a moment and said, "The human race often says that human nature is the most complicated thing in the world. Then this soul is the most mysterious thing in the world. Even immortals don't dare to touch the power of souls. Let's put it this way. The foundation of the Buddhist sect's 9 transformations golden body is reincarnation, and the foundation of reincarnation is the soul. The foundation of the Buddhist sect's golden body and Buddha fruit is faith. Faith is a manifestation of the power of souls. Just this manifestation has created the Buddhist sect, a Buddhist sect that can compete with the Taoist sect. How big of an impact do you think the power of souls will have? Oh, Xiao Hua, what do you think is the most primitive power of souls? P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please come to the starting point to vote. Vote for recommendation, collect, and reward. Thank you for all your support. Chapter 45:11. Of course, Xiao Hua knew that the answer Shuji was talking about was probably the soul. However, he thought about it and answered in the opposite way. From what I know, it should be pure physical strength. Yes, you're right. Shuji nodded. Whether it's the human race, the demon race, the spirit race, the devil race, or the divine race and the holy light race that you don't know about, they all admit that the most primitive power in this world is the physical strength. Of course, the physical bodies of the other races may be different from the physical bodies of the human race. However, as far as I know, an immortal king who once came into contact with the forbidden power said that the most primitive power in this world is probably the soul power. Because the soul was formed long before the physical body can decay and decay, but the soul exists forever. Junior understands. Xiao Hua nodded. You don't understand. Shuji interrupted Xiao Hua unceremoniously and continued to explain, I don't know if you know about the underworld. The underworld has the power of the dead, which is also a part of the soul power. The power of the dead is the nemesis of all magic power, immortal power, and Buddhist power. The underworld is not a simple world. It is the place where all life is annihilated and where all life sprouts. Even someone as strong as the heavenly lord of punishment of the punishment palace doesn't dare to provoke the underworld because the underworld has a part of the soul power. Xiao Hua, Taoists can become immortals by cultivating spells, Confucian cultivators can ascend to heaven by cultivating Confucian techniques, Buddhists can cultivate the 9 transformations golden body, demons can break through the starry sky by tempering their demonic bodies, then, those who can control the soul power, can cultivate gods. Gods. Xiao Hua pretended to be surprised. Gods, what are they? Can they also be cultivated? Shuji didn't answer. He saw that Fairy Xingyu had stopped and turned to look at him. He nodded at Fairy Xingyu and stared at Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua, this is my last sentence. In the future, don't ask any other immortals such questions. Gods may be the end of the immortals' cultivation, or the end of the demon league, the immortal world, and the heavenly court. However, no immortal knows whether or not he will be a god at the end of his cultivation, because there is a saying in the immortal world, gods can never be cultivated. Only the ancient times had gods. In the current era, there are no more miracles, and no more gods. So, Xiao Hua, there's no need to talk about taboo energy in the future. After saying that, Shuji moved and landed beside Fairy Xingyue. He asked, Xingyue, are you ready? Yes, I can activate it now. Fairy Xingyue nodded and said, however, I need a breath of immortal qi. I just changed my body, so I can't activate the immortal mark. Then let me do it. Shuji raised his hand to take the astrolabe, but Fairy Xingyu said worriedly, you just used a similar immortal technique. Can your body withstand it? Didn't I just say it? I don't need this body anymore. It won't be a problem, Shuji indifferently said and took the star plate. Then he shouted to Xiao Hua, who was in a daze, Xiao Hua, quickly come over, we are about to enter. After saying that, Shuji raised his eyebrows again. He looked at the distant starry sky and saw a fat figure. He snorted coldly and said, you're fast. It's only been a moment. I'm afraid you've already killed a few more people. Of course he doesn't care about other people's lives. Fairy Xingyu also said coldly, he only cares about his own life. Xiao Hua was a little shocked by Shuji's words. At this time, he had just come to his senses. He turned his head and looked at the body of the Buddha occupied by the Grand Mist ancestor. He suddenly understood and sighed, I'd rather betray the world than let the world betray me. Let's go, I don't want to see this filthy thing. Shuji raised his hand and threw the astrolabe into the air. He spat a mouthful of immortal chi on the astrolabe. The astrolabe did not change, but Shuji's face began to look old. His sideburns were stained with white frost, and his face was full of wrinkles. Seeing this, Xiao Hua was suddenly shocked and felt a chill run down his back. The warning of the Hutu Stockade's elder Wu rang in his ears again. Shuji's words just now also rang in his ears. He thought with a trembling heart, I don't know if my body is worth the trust in Shuji's heart. Shuji's celestial spiritual chi landed on the astrolabe, and a silvery white brilliance appeared on the astrolabe. Layers of mysterious markings rushed out from the brilliance, and these markings were formed by densely packed runes. As the markings flew out, Shuji rubbed his hands together, and thick crystal lights fell into the astrolabe. The markings then turned into hundreds of flying birds, and these birds had starlight engraved on their foreheads. Their eyes were like crescent moons, and when their wings flapped, the sound of wind and thunder could be heard. Go! Shuji waved his sleeve. The hundreds of birds flew into the meteor belt with a quack-quack sound. Let's go. We'll use the simplest flying technique. Shuji returned the astrolabe to Fairy Xingyu and put his hands behind his back. A faint cloud appeared under his feet, and he rushed into the meteor belt with the birds. Fairy Xingyu took the astrolabe, raised her slender hand, and pointed at different places on the astrolabe. The astrolabe emitted several layers of obscure fluctuations, directing the birds to fly in an extremely zigzagging direction. However, after flying for hundreds of feet, the bird in front exploded with a boom. The birds behind it immediately flapped their tails and flew in another direction beautifully. The fierce inter-realm storm around them was like the night wind, causing the feathers of the birds to tremble slightly. Xiao Hua and the others naturally followed the birds and flew in another direction. The six-star space fragment looked very close, but it was extremely far away. After flying for the time it took for an incense stick to burn, one of the hundreds of birds would be destroyed in a short while. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, there were less than 20 birds left. Looking at the six-star-shaped space fragment again, it seemed to still be flickering with faint starlight in the distance. Shuji said in a low voice, every realm has an edge. There's never an endless thing. The reason why it feels endless is because you're in the realm. As long as you're in the realm, if you don't have a magical power that transcends the realm, even if you reach the edge of the realm, you still won't be able to see the realm. So, you'll feel that the realm is endless. These space fragments come from different realms. The aura of each realm is different, and the aura of the fragments won't merge. Therefore, you can see each space fragment as an independent realm. You're in the meteor belt, so you can also see a larger space fragment. If you can't find a way to enter the space fragment, it will always keep a distance from you. Shuji. Fairy Xingyu said with some dissatisfaction, didn't you say that you can't reveal too much about the immortal divinity? You can't reveal too much about the immortal realm to Xiao Hua. How can you casually tell Xiao Hua about the immortal realm? This is just to broaden his horizons. It's not considered teaching him the mysteries of the immortal realm, Shuji said disapprovingly. Besides, he's already seen the seven-colored shell. Do you think he didn't get anything from it? Hee hee. Xiao Hua smiled and asked, Fairy, I have a question, but I don't know if I should ask it. Don't ask. Fairy Xingyu hurriedly waved her hand and said, your question must involve the immortal realm again. Okay then. Xiao Hua shrugged and immediately stopped asking. However, a smile had already appeared at the corner of his mouth. Sure enough, after a while, Fairy Xingyu urged again, what are you asking? Why aren't you talking? Hee hee. Xiao Hua blinked and asked, Senior, you came from the Palace of Justice. You must know the various realms very well. I don't know. Fairy Xingyu shook her head like a rattledrum. I'm just occasionally ordered by the Palace of Justice to check some things. I've met the demon clan of the 10,000 demon realm who broke through the realms in the Dawn Rain continent. I've also met the 7-colored sea godshell from the Red Sea domain in the 1,000 demons sacred realm. Well, the 2 seniors are also from the immortal realm. I'm very curious. Why is it so easy to break through the realms? Xiao Hua ignored Fairy Xingyu's shaking of her head and asked seriously, didn't Senior Shu just say that it's difficult to break through the realms in the realms? It's naturally difficult to break through the ordinary realms, but the 3 continents are a bit special. Fairy Xingyu was a female immortal after all, so she couldn't help showing off a little. However, she only said half a sentence and stopped. She raised her hand and pointed at the 6-star space fragment that still looked very far away. Look again. Is it close to that space fragment? Okay. Xiao Hua knew that Fairy Xingyu wouldn't say anything else, so he had no choice but to prepare to activate his delusion breaker Dharma Eye. However, before he activated it, he suddenly thought of something and said with a smile, Fairy, I don't know any special spells. Of course, I can't see any clues. Everything still depends on your magic power. Fairy Xingyu glanced at Xiao Hua and rolled her eyes at him. Then, she spat out a mouthful of quintessential essence at the astrolabe in her hand. Swoosh. A pillar of stars rushed out of the astrolabe and caught up with the few remaining birds in front of them. Caw. The birds cried out sadly and turned into fireflies. Then, the entire pillar of stars swept toward the space fragment like a whirlwind. Poof, poof, poof. The sound of explosions came from the pillar of stars. The aura of the realms had hit the pillar of stars and made it full of holes. However, the shattered pillar of stars also revealed a safe path at this time and fell into the brilliance of the space fragment. Shuji was still in front. His figure followed the pillar of stars and fell into the brilliance. Xiao Hua could clearly see that Shuji's figure was getting smaller and smaller. Xiao Hua watched Shuji's figure shrink. Outside the meteor belt in the distance, the fat figure of the Grand Mist Ancestor appeared again. The Grand Mist Ancestor squinted and watched Xiao Hua and the other 2 shrink and fall into the hexagonal space fragment with a solemn expression on his face. Chapter 45:12. The Grand Mist Ancestor originally wanted to fly over and enter the meteor belt with Xiao Hua and the others. However, when he saw Shuji spurting out immortal spiritual energy and activating the astrolabe, he stopped in the distance. It was only when Xiao Hua and the others flew in that he quickly flew over. He looked at the backs of the 3 people and thought to himself, although this person looks a little unfamiliar, the way he activates the astrolabe is exactly the same as that person. If I'm not mistaken, it's him. Since he's still alive, why didn't he save me? This kind of senior, it's fine if I don't recognize him. With that thought, the Grand Mist Ancestor waved his fat monk robe. 2 balls of black and white air flew out and turned into thousands of thin threads in the meteor belt. These thin threads seemed to have intelligence and were rapidly drawn into the turbulent flow of the realm. They were either torn apart or moved against the flow. In just a moment, the turbulent flow that was invisible to the naked eye and divine sense was clearly revealed to the Grand Mist Ancestor. He watched as the black and white threads spread further and gradually covered the space fragments within a dozen li. The black and white threads were indeed effective. Wherever there was a dead end, the black and white threads would cut off randomly. Wherever there was a way out, the threads would rapidly extend and reveal the path of light. Seeing this, the Grand Mist Ancestor smiled proudly. This old man has the yin-yang illustration manual. In this star-moon palace, there's nothing that can stop me. With that said, the Grand Mist Ancestor's figure flickered as he stepped onto the black and white thread. The black and white thread immediately turned into a cloud that carried him towards the nearest light path. When the Grand Mist ancestor's figure gradually shrank, the figures of the scholarly cultivators and the great monsters of the demon race appeared. Xiao Hua followed Fairy Xingyu and flew along the Pillar of Stars. The Pillar of Stars in front of the realm's aura presented a very strange distorted shape. It was like a fried dough twist with 6 revolutions. 3 of the revolutions were blurry and indistinguishable by the time they reached the space. The remaining 3 were crooked as they probed into the space's brilliance. As for the Pillar of Stars, it was destroyed by the realm's aura. In front of the 2 was Shuji. Shuji seemed to be very familiar with this situation. Without any hesitation, not only did he fly with the Pillar of Stars, he also spun with the Pillar of Stars. In fact, there were many times when he was still facing down in Xiao Hua's eyes. Xiao Hua didn't dare to act rashly. His entire body followed the rotation of the star pillar. He didn't dare to be careless at all. After circling around a few times, Xiao Hua suddenly heard a rumbling sound beside his ears. In a flash, the hexagonal spatial fragment that wasn't too far from him suddenly appeared in front of him. The hexagonal fragment had already disappeared, and what entered his eyes was only an enormous light shadow. This light shadow was like a huge dome of heaven, covering the entire space. Moreover, under this dome of heaven, there were several kinds of indescribable auras. These auras interweaved together, blocking the light shadow. However, within the light and shadow, the star pillar had already pierced into the light and shadow, and a series of phantoms that resembled doors appeared in the light and shadow. At this time, Shuji had already stopped. His hands moved slightly, and streaks of water-blue thunderbolts appeared like horned dragons, slowly rolling up and down his body. Fairy Xingyu's face was also solemn. She raised her hand slightly, put away the astrolabe, and took out a magic weapon that looked like a crescent moon. The soft armor on her body also emitted starlight, and a faintly discernible restriction protected her body. Xiao Hua. Shuji called out without turning his head. Take out your magic weapon. I don't know what kind of space is inside this spatial fragment, and I don't know which realm this fragment came from. Yes. As Xiao Hua spoke, he took out the Teng Jiao shears from his bosom. Under the urging of his magic power, the entire Teng Jiao shears emitted a dazzling golden light. Seeing this dazzling golden light swimming in Xiao Hua's hand like a dragon, Fairy Xingyu couldn't help but exclaim, "What a treasure! Xiao Hua, I really didn't expect you to have a capital spiritual treasure. It's a pity that this capital spiritual treasure is somewhat incomplete. I was lucky," Xiao Hua said with a smile. "I snatched it from the Xiaoyu continent. That person took half of it that day, and I don't know where the other half is. It's good that you can use it." Shuji didn't say much. He watched as the shadow of the star pillar crashed into the space gradually solidified. He shouted, "Xingyue, Xiao Hua, let's rush in." "Okay." Fairy Xingyu and Xiao Hua shouted in unison, urging their figures to rush toward the shadow of the door at the same time. Boom! Just as Xiao Hua rushed into the light shadow, he felt that his surroundings were surrounded by clouds and mist, followed by the sound of thunder. Bolts of heavenly lightning fell on top of his head like the Milky Way spilling out. Moreover, there was an inexplicable pressure on Xiao Hua's body. This pressure was so great that it felt as if the whole world was pressing down on his shoulders, making it difficult for him to move. However, this was nothing. The strangest thing was that in addition to the heavy pressure on Xiao Hua's body, there were also tens of millions of tiny vortexes trying to drill into Xiao Hua's body. A sour and painful feeling came from his body. "Chimpage." Xiao Hua snorted coldly and urged his transcendent's golden body. While his body was flowing with golden light, his figure continued to expand. Swish swish. Without waiting for Xiao Hua to straighten his back, 2 silvery white human-shaped lights that were at least 3,000 meters long appeared in front of his head. Moreover, from those lights, there was a kind of pressure that made Xiao Hua feel fear. It surged towards Xiao Hua like a surging tide, blocking Xiao Hua's mouth and nose. Moreover, the pressure was like a mountain pressing down. Xiao Hua's Mahayana cultivator's pressure couldn't help but be stimulated, and he tried his best to resist. However, This pressure was nothing more than a pellet in front of the mountain-like pressure. There was no way it could compare at all. Large beads of sweat dripped down from Xiao Hua's temples. Xiao Hua's straight body was slightly bent as an irresistible fear arose spontaneously. This is the fragment of the immortal realm? Fairy Xingyu was a little puzzled, a little surprised, and screamed with ecstasy. Don't be in such a hurry to look at the fragment. Shuji's calm voice sounded. We didn't expect that the first fragment to be the same space as the immortal realm. Our top priority now is to quickly stabilize the immortal qi in our bodies. Don't strengthen it anymore, or our bodies won't be able to support it. Oh, quickly restrain your pressure. Xiao Hua doesn't have any consciousness, so he can't resist our spiritual pressure. As he spoke, the mountain-like pressure gradually shrank and fell into the silvery light. Only then did Xiao Hua breathe a sigh of relief. He opened his mouth to say something in a hoarse voice, but the abundant immortal qi rushed into his mouth and nose again. This immortal qi was of a much higher level than the yuan qi of heaven and earth in the 3 continents. When it rushed into Xiao Hua's mouth and nose, it immediately caused discomfort in his body. He didn't know how many years he had not felt choking on water, but it rushed into his head. Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly held his breath and condensed his qi, urging the Dharma power in his body to create a defense on the surface of his body. Before he could urge his Dharma power, Shuji's voice sounded from the silvery light. His voice was like a thunderclap that resounded through the entire space. Xiao Hua, don't urge your Dharma power. All your spells now are based on the yuan qi of heaven and earth in the 3 continents. This is a fragment of the realm similar to the immortal realm. The immortal qi inside is similar to the immortal realm. When this immortal qi comes into contact with spells based on the yuan qi of heaven and earth, it will change. If it's light, it will destroy the spell. If it's heavy, it will cause a backlash and invade your body. Okay. Xiao Hua didn't speak and hurriedly nodded. Then, from another silvery human figure, an object that emitted the brilliance of the stars and moon flew out. Fairy Xingyu's voice also sounded from it. "Temph, I hate stingy people like you the most. I don't believe that you don't have a protective, heavenly spiritual treasure. If it weren't for the fact that this is a fragment of the immortal realm and I'm afraid that your body would explode from the immortal qi, I wouldn't have bothered to give you my immortal armor." The object landed in front of Xiao Hua. It was a very simple and crude star armor. This star armor was refined from some strange star stones. Between the star stones were some crystal threads that were as thin as hair. These crystal threads not only strung the star stones together, but they also flashed with traces of cold light, looking very sharp. Xiao Hua took the star armor and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After all, this was Fairy Xingyu's star armor. How could he, a male cultivator, wear it? This suspicion. He still had to avoid it. You can't activate this star armor now. Shuji's voice sounded. Put it on first. I'll activate it for you. Since Shuji didn't say anything, Xiao Hua could only obey. He threw the star armor, which fell like a fishing net. The 100 or so star stones on the star armor covered Xiao Hua's body. Xiao Hua deliberately looked at his chest. Fortunately, there weren't any extra star stones. Catcher! Hundreds of silver-white thunderbolts appeared in the silver figure that Shuji was in and gathered on every star stone on the star armor. Rumble! The star armor actually rumbled like a Dharma treasure. The 100 or so star stones turned into the shape of stars and began to rotate. The immortal qi nearby also let out a cheerful cry and crashed into the stars. In just a moment, the stars turned into pieces and the entire star armor turned into a strange armor that covered Xiao Hua's body. Once the armor was formed, the corrosion from the immortal qi disappeared immediately. The corrosion on his mouth and nose also disappeared. Xiao Hua looked at the armor that was flowing with starlight and moved his hands and feet. He frowned slightly. This was because his body didn't have any special discomfort in the ruins or the primitive continent. Why were there so many abnormalities in this fragment of the immortal realm? Catcher! Xiao Hua's problem was solved. Tens of thousands of tiny thunderbolts appeared around the silver figure that Shuji was in. These thunderbolts were like horned dragons that surrounded the silver figure and rotated crazily. The silver figure also gradually shrank with the rotation of the thunderbolts. At the same time, a resplendent galaxy flew out from the silver figure of another silver figure and also rotated from top to bottom. Every time it rotated, some of the silver light fell into the galaxy. The silver light that was thousands of feet in size shrank almost simultaneously with Shuji's silver light. Chapter 45:13. After the time it took to burn an incense stick, Shuji and Fairy Xingyu's bodies were revealed again, but this time, they were different from before. Not only were there silver scars all over their bodies, but there were also lightning and starlight flowing through these scars, as if they were trying to stop these scars from spreading. The armor that they had worn before was also faintly flashing between the silver spots, looking erratic. The strangest thing was their faces. In the beginning, their faces were replaced by a flickering silver light. Later on, their faces gradually appeared. However, some parts of their faces were that of humans, while some parts were covered by silver light. It looked extremely strange. In the end, their faces were completely revealed. However, from time to time, their faces would be covered by the silver light. When their faces were revealed, there was nothing special about them. However, when they were covered by the silver light, a kind of majesty and respect was involuntarily emitted, forcing Xiao Hua to move slightly. Presumably. Behind the star armor, Xiao Hua slightly narrowed his eyes and thought to himself, this is the true appearance of an immortal. Phew. Shuji let out a long breath, looking even more nervous than Xiao Hua. Fairy Xingyu raised her arm, shook it a few times, and said, this body is really tiring. The feeling of freedom just now was really good. Yes. Shuji nodded. When we were in the immortal realm, we never felt that there was anything abnormal about it. But after leaving the immortal realm, we realized the benefits of an immortal body. There's a saying in my hometown, when you're not sick, you're not sick. When you're sick, you realize the importance of health. Let's go quickly. Fairy Xingyu said with a smile. I can't wait. This time, we have to find the passage back to the immortal realm no matter what. Xiao Hua. Shuji nodded, looked at Xiao Hua, and asked, can you still adapt? It's okay for now. Xiao Hua nodded. However, I don't know what role I can play in this fragment of the immortal realm. In this fragment of the immortal realm, you're just a mortal. Fairy Xingyu said with a smile. Your magic arts, magic treasures, and other things can't be used. Even if it could be used, its effect would not be comparable to an immortal artifact. Oh, don't rashly open your Chenkuan pouch here. Be careful that the immortal spiritual energy inside your Chenkuan pouch will burst. As for your Kunlun mirror, it should be usable, but I can't guarantee that it won't be damaged if you don't refine it with immortal qi. Forget it, forget it. Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, just treat me as an idle person. With two real immortals following me, what do I have to be afraid of? Hee hee. Fairy Xingyu covered her mouth and giggled. Then let's make a cupboard. After saying that, Fairy Xingyu released her lingering thoughts, wanting to look into the distance. Shuji hurriedly stopped her and said, Xingyu, it's better to be careful. Don't release too many lingering thoughts. Got it. Goddess Xingyu smiled sweetly. Coincidentally, her appearance was covered by the silver light. A sweet smile seemed to pass through the space and into Xiao Hua's mind. Fairy Xingyu did not release her lingering thoughts into the distance. Her figure flew slowly. Shuji waved his sleeve and covered Xiao Hua's body. He said, let's go. And followed Fairy Xingyu. After flying for a while, Fairy Xingyu released her star shuttle with a wave of her hand. At this time, the star shuttle was even more majestic than before. Tens of thousands of starlight rushed into the sky and fell in all directions, like a dazzling meteor shower. However, after a while, the starlight withered and disappeared into thin air. Fairy Xingyu's face changed drastically as she looked at Shuji. Shuji frowned slightly but did not care. He raised his hand and pointed ahead. The two of them flew over with Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua looked a little absent-minded. He did not pay attention to Fairy Xingyu's star shuttle. He was puzzled by the smile that Fairy Xingyu transmitted into his mind. What are immortals? I have never seen immortals before, so I have never thought about this question. Now that these two exiled immortals have been here for a long time, they feel that immortals are similar to us. But today, when I really came to the fragment of the immortal world, I realized that immortals are completely different from us mortals. In Tao sect cultivation, the physical body is extremely important. It is also the foundation of becoming an immortal. Without a physical body, one cannot ascend to the immortal world. Previously, I thought that it was because the immortal spirit chi was different from the heaven and earth origin chi. If it were not for the protection of the physical body, the nascent soul would be destroyed by the immortal spirit chi. But now, it seems that if the physical body has not been cleansed by the spirit cleansing pool, it cannot withstand the immortal spirit chi. Then, how can I protect my nascent soul? Moreover, Shuji had said before that even if I lost my physical body, as long as I cultivated my scattered soul to the 9 tribulations, I would be able to grow a physical body. Naturally, I would be able to enter the spirit cleansing pool and grow a physical body. It seems that the spirit cleansing pool is the most important thing. The spirit cleansing liquid in the spirit cleansing pool. What is it? What is the difference between it and the dragon cleansing liquid in the dragon cleansing pool? Xiao Hua's question could only be a question. Not to mention that he could not find any answers now. Even if he asked Shuji would probably not answer him. However, in a short moment, he had a new question. He looked at the ground that whistled past. On the ground, there were either deep ravines or undulating mountain ranges. It seemed that everything on the ground was much larger than the 3 continents. He asked curiously, Senior, Junior has 2 questions to ask. Shuji looked ahead and answered expressionlessly. Senior said before that the so-called realm. As long as one is within it, one will not be able to see the edge. We've entered this spatial fragment, so how can we find the way out? Xiao Hua asked. The spatial fragments in the meteor belt are all incomplete. They were used by people with great ability to set up defenses when the Star Moon Palace was refined in the ancient times. Once we find the location of the other incomplete part of the spatial fragment, we will be able to see the meteor belt. From there, we can fly to the other spatial fragment. Shuji answered fluently. However, he stopped at this point, as if there were some secrets that he did not say. Xiao Hua nodded and asked again. Senior said that there are fragments of realms parallel to the 1,000 Demons Sacred Realm, fragments of realms parallel to the Immortal Realm, and fragments of realms parallel to the ancient times. This time, when we enter the fragment of realms parallel to the Immortal Realm, the immortal chi inside is extremely dense. Even with Junior's strength, I can't withstand it. How can the cultivators who followed Senior in the past withstand it? Actually, it's like this. Shuji said without any hesitation, although I don't have a space or a spatial immortal weapon, I still have the Heaven and Earth bracelet. Under normal circumstances, I respect the wishes of those cultivators and bring them here to gain experience. If an accident really happens, I will definitely keep them in the Heaven and Earth bracelet. Although staying in the Heaven and Earth bracelet is an insult to the human race, it's still better than losing their lives. Of course, if I didn't make it in time, like just now, they would have lost their lives. I don't have any good ideas. After all, Xingyu's star armor isn't something that just anyone can borrow. Oh, also, Shuji continued, previously, we also encountered some fragments of realms parallel to the immortal realm. However, the immortal chi inside those fragments was already thin. Although it was somewhat dangerous, it was far from being as serious as today. Also, Xiao Hua thought for a moment and asked again. Hey, didn't you have 2 questions? Shuji asked curiously. Xiao Hua smiled. Junior has thought of another problem. Ian, say it. Shuji nodded. Know what you know, don't know what you don't know. You are suitable to be a Confucian cultivator. Senior said so. Xiao Hua asked. There are also fragments of realms parallel to the ancient times. Then, the immortal realm should be of a higher level than the immortal realm, right? Yes, the immortal realm usually calls the immortal realm, Shuji replied. Then, Xiao Hua asked, Senior and the others entered the fragment of the immortal realm, did their bodies feel uncomfortable? What about those lower-level disciples? At this moment, Shuji showed a rare hesitation. After a moment, Shuji opened his mouth. Xiao Hua, this question. I can answer you. But I don't know if my answer is correct because I have never been to the immortal realm and I don't know what the ancient times were like. I also don't know what the ancient times were like when the Star Moon Palace was refined. I only know that some fragments are similar to the 3 continents and the realms below the immortal realm. Some fragments are similar to the immortal realm, the Demon League and the Heavenly Court. And some fragments are different from these 2 places. So Xingyue and I think, listen carefully, we think that these fragments might be fragments of the ancient times. But whether these fragments are fragments of the ancient times or not, we don't know. And in these fragments, our bodies didn't change, and the bodies of those lower-level disciples didn't change either. I also don't know what I am talking about. Do you understand? Yes, Junior understands. Although the doubts in Xiao Hua's heart grew stronger, he still heaved a sigh of relief. Are you sure you understand? Shuji asked curiously. I won't hide it from you. I thought about this before, but this matter has nothing to do with cultivation and returning to the immortal realm. I just thought about it and threw it away. Ian, this junior thinks so too. Xiao Hua said with a smile. This junior just had a sudden whim. Then, the 2 of them fell silent. They flew forward silently. Xiao Hua didn't know what Shuji was thinking, but he knew that although Shuji was an immortal, Shuji didn't understand the ancient times as well as Xiao Hua. Not only had Xiao Hua been to the immortal realm, but Xiao Hua's Fortune Gate disciples had also been there. When those 5th grade Essence Force disciples were in the immortal realm, their bodies didn't go through any special tempering, and they also didn't experience the same problem as today, and Xiao Hua's body, which was a half-god body, was actually corroded by the immortal spiritual energy. This was something that Xiao Hua couldn't understand. Chapter 45:14. After a long while, Fairy Xingyu saw some colorful lights filling the sky in front of her. She said in surprise, Shuji, look, there is still light in this space fragment. Maybe there is an ancient cave residence. Our opportunity has come. Don't be careless. Shuji hurriedly reminded her. The more abodes there are, the more celestial beasts there will be. You must be careful. I know. Do I need you to tell me that? Fairy Xingyu said indifferently and sped up again. As if reminded by the light, Shuji hesitated and said, Xiao Hua, I think the problem you mentioned just now is like this. Before Taoist cultivators ascend to become celestials, they rely on the chi of heaven and earth to cultivate. When they reach the celestial realm, they will not be able to adapt to the celestial spiritual chi. As for the celestials in the celestial realm, low-level celestials such as mortal fairies also rely on the celestial spiritual chi to cultivate. When they reach the high level, they will no longer rely on the celestial spiritual chi. Presumably, in the untainted divine realm, the foundation of cultivation is also different. Therefore, the cultivators will be troubled by the celestial spiritual chi in the fragment of the celestial realm. But in the fragment of the untainted divine realm, there will be no such confusion, right? What do high-level celestials rely on to cultivate? Xiao Hua asked, hitting the nail on the head. Alas, that's why I don't want to answer your question. Shuji sighed. You haven't cultivated to that level yet. It's really not good for you to know too much. After that, Shuji stopped talking and flew ahead with Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua had no choice but to shut up. After another 10 minutes, the light was in sight. Under the light, there was neither a spiritual vein nor an abode, but a vast expanse of tall palaces that stretched as far as the eye could see. These palaces were tens of thousands of feet tall, but all of them were damaged or collapsed. If it weren't for the extremely beautiful light emitted by these palaces, they wouldn't be much different from the ruins of the mortal world. As they flew closer, Xiao Hua saw that the ground around the palaces was covered with deep cracks and deep holes. These cracks and deep holes were obviously caused by a fight. Next to these cracks, there were some broken celestial artifacts scattered around. This. Fairy Xingyu looked at Shuji in surprise. Shuji also looked surprised. The two of them sped up again, hiss. In just a moment, not to mention Shuji and Fairy Xingyue, even Xiao Hua could not help but gasp. Because right before the overturned wreckage, there were already many wreckages of several thousand feet in length lying on the ground. These corpses were different from the corpses of the human clan. Most of them were wearing armors and holding some fairy weapons in their hands. Inside the armors, there was either nothing, or some shells that looked like tree roots. Of course, there were also some corpses that had collapsed beyond recognition. Something's wrong, Shuji suddenly growled. He raised his hand and a spear-like immortal artifact fell into his hand. He glanced at the bottom of the immortal artifact and exclaimed, "Yi Qiong Heavenly Mansion? How is this possible?" Fairy Xingyu exclaimed as if she had seen a ghost. She also raised her hand and another empty armor fell into her hand. When she looked at the mark on the inside of the armor, her face was as incredulous as Shuji's. How is this possible? Then, Shuji threw Xiao Hua to the ground and said, "Stay here and don't move. Remember, don't move. This is very important." After that, without waiting for Xiao Hua to answer, he rushed toward the dilapidated palaces in the distance. Of course, Fairy Xingyue was no exception. Her figure flashed, faster than the light shadow, almost surpassing Shuji's figure. "Yi Qiong Heavenly Mansion?" Xiao Hua naturally heard Shuji's exclamation. He did not understand what this Yi Qiong Heavenly Mansion was. However, judging from the reactions of the two immortals, one was a law enforcer and the other was a law enforcer, this so-called Heavenly Mansion was definitely a famous place in the immortal realm. Moreover, since the two immortals did not want to go in with him, there must be some so-called secret of the immortal realm inside. Xiao Hua naturally knew to stay where he was. Of course, Xiao Hua only stood there for a moment before he came to his senses. Damn it, that's not right. This Xingyue palace was refined in ancient times. Since Shuji and Fairy Xingyu know about this Yi Qiong Heavenly Mansion, this space fragment must have been left behind from the immortal realm in ancient times. In that case. Thinking of this, a smile appeared on Xiao Hua's face. In that case, this Yi Qiong Heavenly Mansion must be a secret place in ancient times. There are endless secrets hidden inside. Damn it, this space fragment is a huge gold mine. Since I've already entered the gold mine, how can I return empty-handed? Since he knew that this collapsed palace was a famous secret of the immortal realm in ancient times, how could Xiao Hua still stand in the distance obediently? He rolled his eyes and activated the flying technique of the soul cultivator. He stuck close to the ground and walked to another place. As he walked, he sensed his own space. Sure enough, as Fairy Xingyu had said, he could already sense his space here. Everything in the space could be taken out. Xiao Hua even tried to put an empty armor and immortal weapon into the space. He could do the same. However, the armor and immortal weapon were not located in the original Shenhua continent. Therefore, Xiao Hua kept some armor and immortal weapons into the space as he walked. Xiao Hua also noticed some things like bracelets, rings, and storage bags. He did not even look at them. They were all put into the space. Xiao Hua was already used to stealing things. It had even become a technique. There were many bodies lying on the ground outside the palace. They were either dense or sparse. When they were sparse, Xiao Hua only took those bracelets, belts, and the like. When they were dense, Xiao Hua took 4 out of 10 of them. This made it so that the density would become sparse and not arouse suspicion. Damn, these are all immortal weapons. The more Xiao Hua walked, the more excited he became. This feeling of reaping without sowing was really rare and wonderful. However, after walking for a while, he didn't see Shuji and Fairy Xingyue. Xiao Hua walked to the other side of the hall. When he got there, Xiao Hua suddenly stopped. He closed his eyes and seemed to be thinking. After a moment, he suddenly looked into the distance and thought to himself, that's not right. Previously, in front of the palace, those armors. Oh, I'll take it as the place where the immortals fell. The immortals seemed to have fallen in one direction, as if, in the direction where I came from. These immortals seemed to be blocking another pair of immortals. The direction of these immortals was similar to the direction where I came from. Moreover, there are more belts and rings here. These immortal weapons are also of a higher level. Could it be? Could it be? Thinking about this, Xiao Hua wanted to release his divine sense, but after a short moment, Xiao Hua shrugged his shoulders and said with a low chuckle, "This Xiao came here as a mortal. Not only do I have no divine sense, I also have no magic power. I can't even open the storage pouch. All the strange things that have happened here have nothing to do with me. No matter what happens, I'm the most innocent." Xiao Hua smiled. He carefully identified the direction and walked in one direction. Along the way, he used his mind to store all the immortal weapons, armors, and immortal slips into his space. Sure enough, in the time it took to finish a meal, a bottomless abyss appeared in front of them. Within the abyss, there were many five-colored clouds. Amidst the clouds, two lights that were brighter than the sun floated within the abyss, illuminating the entire abyss. However, the clouds blocked the lights, so they could not be seen from a distance. Oh my God! As soon as Xiao Hua approached the abyss, he immediately felt the spiritual pressure in the light shadow that was even more vast than that of Shuji and Fairy Xingyu. Xiao Hua felt as if a heavy hammer had hit his chest. He could not get close at all. This is a big fish. Xiao Hua was overjoyed and almost screamed. These must be two big shots who fought to the death. Xiao Hua did not hesitate and hurriedly released his mind. Sure enough, the spiritual pressure was like a mountain or an ocean, but Xiao Hua's mind could still get close. Of course, Xiao Hua's mind was just a trickle that could only flow around the light shadow. Even so, Xiao Hua could already see that these were two shells that were tens of thousands of feet in size. The shells were full of a mixture of golden and silver light. There were also two immortal weapons in the light shadow. One was shaped like a knife, and the other was shaped like a spear. However, Xiao Hua's mind could not get close to these two immortal weapons. Damn it, you're already dead. Why are you still so stingy? Xiao Hua knew that these two immortals who had perished together were definitely big shots in the immortal world. He gritted his teeth. It seemed that the immortal weapons and other items that he had collected earlier were all scrap metal. No. Xiao Hua shouted inwardly. Even if this is a tiger, this Xiao will still pluck the fur from the tiger's tail. Thinking about this, Xiao Hua's mind flowed like a stream between the tens of thousands of feet large shell and the armor. His mind, was like a sympathetic person's hand that was extremely affectionate as it gently wandered around the wreckage. It was unwilling to cross over inch by inch. Ha ha! When Xiao Hua's mind passed through the armor and landed on the belt, Xiao Hua's mind saw something that looked like a jade seal. Xiao Hua did not hesitate at all. His mind moved like a hand and immediately put the jade seal into the space. Immediately after, a thumb-sized jade pillar and a pitch-black box were also put into the space by Xiao Hua. When Xiao Hua's mind was ready to leave the wreckage, he saw a pendant hanging on the belt. Xiao Hua put away the pendant, but he still wanted more. Damn it, if I'm not afraid of being discovered by Shuji, this belt, TSK, forget it. The other wreckage was similar to this one. It also had a lot of harvest. In addition to the golden seal, there was also a pendant, a 5-claw-like pendant, a multi-pronged jade pillar, and a simple and unadorned key. Chapter 45:15. Phew. After looting the wreckage, Xiao Hua let out a long breath and said with a smile, "Finally, this trip was not in vain." In order not to arouse Shuji and Fairy Xingyu's suspicion, Xiao Hua hurriedly turned around and wanted to leave. However, just as he turned around, he suddenly froze on the spot. He hurriedly released his mind in disbelief. Sure enough, a moment later, Xiao Hua revealed a thoughtful expression and thought to himself, "It's a little strain." These two, unknown immortals had clearly perished together. However, one of them is holding a weapon in both hands, the other is holding a weapon in one hand, and the other hand. Why is it covering his back armpit? His back armpit is obviously not injured, so why is he covering it there? There must be something he cares about there. Even if he dies, he must protect it. Thinking about this, Xiao Hua urged his mind and moved the immortal's hand away and placed it on the ground. Then, his mind penetrated into the armpit of the immortal. It was very strange. The immortal's body was different from the mortal's body. When Xiao Hua's mind penetrated into the armpit, the immortal's body actually split open as if it was melting. Then, a 9-colored brilliance bloomed. Within the brilliance, an indescribable polyhedron appeared. It seemed to be in this space, but also seemed to not be in this space. Of course, this brilliance flashed and the polyhedron was immediately taken into the space by Xiao Hua. This polyhedron was different from the fairy artifacts that Xiao Hua had taken into the space before. It fell into the space that had not been formed before. Seeing that the treasure was in his hands, Xiao Hua did not delay at all. He turned around and went to other places to continue searching for armor, fairy artifacts, belts, and other things. Xiao Hua originally thought that Shu Ji and Fairy Xingyu would find him soon. However, what puzzled him was that Shu Ji and Fairy Xingyu did not appear for a full hour. Could it be that there is an even more powerful restriction in this palace? Xiao Hua looked at the palace in front of him. Although the huge stone pillars had collapsed, the beautiful stone walls were flashing with brilliance for a long time. Xiao Hua had some thoughts in his mind. However, he was very self-aware. If Shu Ji and Fairy Xingyu could not escape from the restriction in the palace, how could he? Since he was not empty-handed, why should he take the risk? Especially if there were taboos within this hall, then wouldn't he have touched the bottom line of the immortal dimension? Shu Ji and Fairy Xingyu did not fall into a predicament like Xiao Hua had imagined. They did not separate, but hurriedly shuttled through the collapsed and dilapidated hall side by side. There were also many corpses in the hall, as well as many precious weapons and other items. However, the two of them did not take a second look at them. They did not dare to release too much of their expanded thoughts and only extended them out a few 100 feet. However, their eyes were different at this time. One of Fairy Xingyu's eyes was like a full moon, while the other was like a bright star. Shu Ji's eyes flashed with lightning. The two of them looked at each other with different gazes, as if they were searching for something. They flew into a huge palace. In this palace, there was a huge chair that had been split in half. On the stone wall above the chair, there was a plaque that gave off a milky white light. This plaque was now hanging at a slanted angle, and most of it was already broken. The gazes of the two landed on the signboard at the same time. Their bodies shook violently. At the same time, the silver light hidden under the armor involuntarily rushed out and wrapped around the bodies of the two. A moment later, the figures and faces of the two were once again revealed. Fairy Xingyu was shocked. She rushed to the front of the throne and wanted to take a closer look. However, before she could get close, the throne that had been split in half gave off an awe-inspiring aura, forcing Fairy Xingyu to retreat. She couldn't get close to the throne at all. Fairy Xingyu had no choice but to fly high and try her best to get close to the plaque on the stone wall. After taking a closer look, Fairy Xingyu's body stiffened. After a long while, she whispered, "How is this possible? This is really the Yi Qiong Heavenly Mansion, the most mysterious immortal mansion of the legendary Yi Qiong. This immortal mansion. Isn't it in the immortal realm? How did it become a realm fragment of Star Moon Palace? Could it be that the Yi Qiong Heavenly Mansion disappeared in ancient times? That's even more impossible." Shu Ji shook his head and said, "Yi Qiong is a celestial venerable who became a celestial venerable recently before we fell into the mortal world. His Yi Qiong Heavenly Mansion only appeared in the last 20 million years. How could it have disappeared in ancient times? Unless there was another Yi Qiong Heavenly Mansion in ancient times, there's no other explanation for it being in Star Moon Palace." Fairy Xingyu deduced without hesitation. Shu Ji nodded and said, "That's possible. No one can guarantee that there wasn't another Yi Qiong Heavenly Mansion in ancient times. But. Fairy Xingyu hesitated a few times, and her face was full of doubts. She did not say the reason for the but. There seemed to be endless hesitation in her heart. Shu Ji seemed to know what Fairy Xingyu wanted to say. He looked at Fairy Xingyu and opened his mouth, but in the end, he sighed and closed his mouth. Finally, Fairy Xingyu probed, "Shu Ji, you've been following me since we entered this heavenly mansion. Are you afraid that there are restrictions in this heavenly mansion and want to protect me?" Shu Ji shook his head and said, This heavenly mansion has been destroyed. How could there be restrictions? Moreover, the heavenly mansion is full of celestial generals who have been killed. Even if there were restrictions, I'm afraid they would have been triggered by them. However, I don't want to be separated from you because I want to protect you. At the same time, I'm also protecting myself. Alas, that's right. Fairy Xingyu also understood what Shuji meant, but she still did not want to make it clear. She sighed and said, in that case, you and I, in this heavenly mansion, we can't be separated. Yes. Shuji smiled bitterly. We'll search together and then come here. Then we'll be honest. That's the only way. Fairy Xingyu's smile became even more bitter. It seemed that if she was given another chance, she would definitely not enter this space fragment so easily. Afterwards, the two of them spent another hour walking through most of the halls. Afterwards, they did not touch any of the items or corpses in the halls, and they returned to the main hall. Looking at the throne again, Shuji said, Xingyu, I think we're in big trouble. Alas, yes. Fairy Xingyu stamped her feet in midair and said, this is indeed the mysterious Yiqiong heavenly mansion that is widely rumored in the celestial realm. But this heavenly mansion, why would it be in the ancient Star Moon Palace? The ancient Star Moon Palace? Shuji said with a faint smile, who told you this? I'm afraid you came up with it yourself, right? Why not? Fairy Xingyu frowned and said, although we found this Star Moon Palace first. The token to open this Star Moon Palace can also be found in the 3 continents. This means that before we came, the Star Moon Palace already existed and someone had already entered. It's just that they probably didn't have your divination skills. After they came in occasionally, they couldn't find any trace of the Star Moon Palace. Even so, it doesn't mean that the Star Moon Palace existed in ancient times, nor does it mean that the space fragments in this meteor belt were refined in the Star Moon Palace in ancient time. Shuji explained, this Yiqiong heavenly mansion is the best proof. The Yiqiong heavenly mansion must have fallen into the Star Moon Palace within 1,000,000 years. Okay. Fairy Xingyu was impatient and waved her hand. What's the use of saying this now? Let's find the divine cultivation mirror first. The problem is, Shuji looked worried. The divine cultivation mirror is just a legend. Who knows if it really exists? Even immortal King Tu Gong has never admitted it. Shuji, do you know that there's no smoke without fire? Fairy Xingyu said, if Heavenly Venerate Yiqiong wasn't immortal King Tu Gong's most trusted Heavenly Venerate and if he didn't steal the divine cultivation mirror, how could this legend have spread in the celestial realm? If it weren't for this legend, how could the Yiqiong heavenly mansion disappear from the celestial realm? Even the Palace of Law doesn't know where the Yiqiong heavenly mansion is. I think. Shuji shook his head and said, it's better if we don't look for it. How about we pretend that we never came here at all? How is that possible? Fairy Xingyu smiled bitterly and shook her head. From the moment we saw the Yiqiong heavenly mansion, it was already difficult for us to escape from this strange vortex in the celestial realm. If you don't say it, I won't say it. Well, Xiao Hua won't say it either. Plus, he doesn't know where this place is. Even if we returned to the celestial realm, who would know that we came to the Yiqiong heavenly mansion? Shuji said sincerely. Shuji, I believe you. I also believe that you will never tell anyone. Fairy Xingyu shook her head. But I don't trust Xiao Hua. This guy has too many secrets. I can't guarantee that after he ascends to the celestial realm and hears the legend, he won't think of this place. Plus, I don't believe in myself. If the Palace of Law wants to know what we have done in the mortal world all these years, they won't be able to see what we have seen here. But, Shuji said earnestly, if we start looking for it, regardless of whether we find it or not, we will be killed. If we find it, we won't be killed. Fairy Xingyu said with a smile. If we can't find it, we may not be punished. But if we don't find it, we may be guilty of a great crime. According to the legend, the cultivation mirror is the supreme cultivation method that can make one become a god. Whether you find it or not, it will be troublesome. Shuji tried to persuade her again. He knew very well that if Fairy Xingyu found the cultivation mirror, she would definitely give it to the Celestial Master of Law. If the Celestial Master of Law wanted to keep this secret, he would have to kill Fairy Xingyu. However, if Fairy Xingyu couldn't find the cultivation mirror and any immortals knew that she had come to the Yi Qiong heavenly mansion, they would definitely suspect that Fairy Xingyu had secretly kept the cultivation mirror. The wisest thing to do was to immediately leave this place and never mention this matter again. Even if the Celestial Masters or Celestial Kings searched their souls in the future, they could still maintain their innocence. Chapter 45:16. Yes, I know. Shuji nodded. He flew to a corpse and released his extended thought to examine it carefully. Fairy Xingyu always said that Xiao Hua was stingy and greedy. Now, it was her turn. She was much slower than Xiao Hua. After a while, her celestial artifact could not hold too much. When she wanted to look for the storage celestial artifacts on the corpses, she found that most of the corpses did not have any storage celestial artifact. Fairy Xingyu did not wait any longer. She threw away some of the low-quality celestial artifacts she had obtained earlier and put in better ones. Even so, looking at the many celestial artifacts in front of her that she could not take, Fairy Xingyu was very unhappy. Perhaps I should get Shuji to collect more. Fairy Xingyu looked up at Shuji, who was not far away. However, after watching for a moment, she was a little surprised. This was because Shuji was observing more than taking action. He seemed to be searching for something. Hey, Shuji, why don't you take these things? Fairy Xingyu was a little puzzled. What are you looking for? Shuji looked up and replied, I'm not looking for anything. I just feel that these corpses seem to have been moved by someone. The storage celestial artifacts are all gone. Moreover, the armor and weapons on these corpses are all from the Yi Qiong heavenly mansion. We don't know how to refine celestial artifacts. Even if we take all these celestial artifacts, we can't use them. Instead of that, it's better to just take some as evidence. Even if you can't use them, you can take them to trade. Fairy Xingyu urged. We have been in the lower realm for so long that our cultivation can't catch up with our peers. If we don't get some elixirs and secret techniques, how can we cultivate to the celestial master level? Xingyu, Shuji said, didn't you notice? Most of the corpses in the heavenly mansion have storage celestial artifacts. We can go back and take a few more. Ah! Fairy Xingyu blushed and said in a low voice, at that time, I was shocked and wanted to find the truth about the Yi Qiong heavenly mansion. I didn't notice this. Shuji nodded and looked up at one of the corpses. He raised his hand and grabbed it. A jet-black software flew out from the corpse. He looked around and said, this is not bad. It's perfect for Xiao Hua to wear. TSK. Fairy Xingyu rolled her eyes at Shuji and said, he has worn it. How can I take it? The star armor's quality is average. Just give it to him. Shuji responded with boredom. He was about to lower his head to search again when suddenly, several thoughts that were very similar to Yang Nian's came from afar like a gust of wind. They swept across the abyss, the corpses, and landed on Shuji and Fairy Xingyu. That will was incomparably cold, filled with bloodlust and brutality. When it landed on the two of them, silver light immediately erupted. Ying Nian. Shuji was the first to sense it. His expression changed drastically as he exclaimed, there's actually an immortal beast here? Fairy Xingyue's face was also pale. She moved her body and said, of course there will be immortal beast. But immortal beasts with telepathy, how can we resist them? Let's go. Ayo, Xiao Hua. Shuji hurriedly followed Fairy Xingyu and flew into the divine palace. However, after flying for a while, he realized something. Xiao Hua is still outside the divine palace. This little guy. Fairy Xingyu said angrily, why didn't he wait in place? Why did he run? With that, the two of them moved like lightning in the direction of Xiao Hua. The yin yang that fell on them was still like the wind, closing in on them step by step. Xiao Hua was easy to find. Following the footprints he left behind earlier, Shuji only flew for half a cup of tea's time before he saw the high slope filled with corpses in front of him. Xiao Hua was holding a rod-shaped immortal tool that was several hundred zhong in size in his hand. He was clumsily climbing up, wanting to climb up the high slope. However, some immortal tools on the high slope were in a mess. Xiao Hua accidentally fell into a huge armor. Xiao Hua. Shuji was both angry and amused. Before he could get close, he shouted, "Come back quickly. There are immortal beasts around the divine palace." Ayo, senior. Hearing Shuji's voice, Xiao Hua hurriedly turned around and waved the immortal weapon. "Look, what did I find? This immortal weapon is just right for me." "Idiot!" Fairy Xingyue shouted, "How can you touch the immortal weapon here? Why don't you put it down quickly?" Xiao Hua was stunned and asked curiously, "Senior, didn't you say there were immortal beasts? Wouldn't it be better for me to have one for self-defense? Why do you want me to put it down?" As he spoke, Shuji had already flown close. Without saying a word, he raised his hand and pointed a finger. A bolt of lightning fell on the immortal artifact, causing it to shrink abruptly. Then, he waved his sleeve and was about to take Xiao Hua away. However, even though the immortal artifact in Xiao Hua's hand had shrunk, it was still incomparably heavy. Shuji's figure was pulled down while Xiao Hua's figure only flew up a few feet. "Throw it away quickly," Fairy Xingyue said anxiously. "The immortal beasts are coming soon. We have to hide in the divine palace quickly. If you take this immortal weapon, Shuji can't fly quickly." "No." Xiao Hua refused without hesitation. He held the immortal weapon in his arms and said, "Without this immortal weapon, I am powerless. With this immortal weapon, I can resist the immortal beast." "You? Who do you think you are?" Fairy Xingyue was furious. She raised her hand and a ray of starlight was about to strike down. She shouted, "Do you think this immortal beast is one of the 6 great sages of the 1,000 demons sacred realm? How can you be a match for an immortal beast?" "Xingyue," Shuji shouted, "go back to the divine palace first and wait at the gate. I will fly back with Xiao Hua." "You." Fairy Xingyue was a little flustered and exasperated. She really didn't understand why Shuji indulged Xiao Hua so much. In her eyes, Xiao Hua was just a mortal. Even if he had an immortal weapon, he couldn't be a match for an immortal beast. Fairy Xingyue stomped her feet and turned around to fly away. However, she stopped again after flying 100 feet. She opened her mouth and the previous star shuttle flew out again. At this time, the star shuttle landed in the air. It was different from before. Layers of immortal spirit chi swarmed into it and the entire star shuttle emitted a dreamy glow. In the air thousands of feet around the star shuttle, besides the immortal spirit chi, there was also a kind of frost-like cold air. Xiao Hua thought that Fairy Xingyue was controlling the star shuttle to fly him and Shuji. Unexpectedly, Fairy Xingyue raised her hand and pointed at the star shuttle. The star shuttle slowly rotated and hundreds of starlight rays emerged from the front of the star shuttle, piercing straight into the air. Fairy Xingyue turned her head and shouted, "Quick, I hope we can rush back to the divine palace before the immortal beast flies over." "Go!" Shuji no longer waved his sleeve. Instead, he waved his hand. A bolt of lightning descended and sealed the space around Xiao Hua. Then, with a loud roar, he grabbed the immortal artifact along with Xiao Hua. His figure descended and flew towards the gate of the heavenly sanctum. Flying with Xiao Hua and the immortal weapon was obviously a little too much for Shuji. Big drops of sweat rolled down Shuji's forehead and the silver light under the armor rushed out several times. Xiao Hua was also in a dilemma. He wanted to throw the immortal weapon away several times, but when he saw the solemn faces of Shuji and Fairy Xingyue, he knew that the immortal beast that hadn't appeared yet must be very powerful. If he didn't have this immortal weapon, he would not only be food for the immortal beast, but also a burden to the two of them. Although Shuji was a little tired now, it was better than losing his life later. "Ayo!" Suddenly, a strange beast roar sounded. When Xiao Hua heard it, he couldn't help but tremble. Golden flowers appeared in front of his eyes and sparks flew in all directions from his Niwen palace. Fairy Xingyue and Shuji's bodies glowed with silver light at the same time, protecting them. Xiao Hua was below Shuji. He could clearly see that when the silver light appeared, traces of blood seeped out of Shuji's body. "Nimbus immortal beast! Nimbus immortal beast!" Fairy Xingyue panicked. How could there be a nimbus immortal beast here? Although Shu Ji also showed a rare trace of panic on his face, he replied calmly, the space fragments here are different from the ones we encountered before. It's normal for immortal beasts to appear that are beyond imagination. The problem is, Fairy Xingyue urged the star shuttle and shouted, if we were at our peak strength, we might be able to defeat this nimbus immortal beast. But now, how can we resist this nimbus immortal beast? Divine Palace. Shu Ji didn't mention the name of the Yi Qiong Heavenly Palace. He only said that it was the Divine Palace path. We didn't see the nimbus immortal beast around the Divine Palace before. This immortal beast must be afraid of the Divine Palace's restrictions. We can hide in the Divine Palace. That's the only way. Shu Ji mentioned the Divine Palace again, as if to encourage Fairy Xingyue. Fairy Xingyue gritted her teeth and flew toward the gate of the Divine Palace. Xiao Hua also frowned and asked in a low voice, Senior, what kind of immortal beast is this nimbus immortal beast? Why is it so powerful? It's not appropriate to mention it now, Shu Ji said lightly, when you see it, you'll naturally know. In fact, it doesn't have to be this nimbus immortal beast. In other places outside the meteor belt, those immortal beasts are not as cruel and fierce as the nimbus immortal beast. Ordinary cultivators are definitely no match for it. After saying that, Shu Ji ignored Xiao Hua and focused on flying toward the gate of the palace. Awoo! Seeing the gate of the Divine Palace appear in front of her, Fairy Xingyue's face was filled with joy. Suddenly, she heard a roar coming from high up in the sky. Xiao Hua looked up and saw 3 strange immortal beasts that were several hundred zhong in size flying over like shooting stars. Before they could even get close, Xiao Hua felt a chill in the surroundings, and a bloody smell emerged out of nowhere. Moreover, within the space, there were some faint spots that appeared. These spots were like ferocious eyes that stared at the 3 of them. Looking at the place where the clouds were surging, the so-called nimbus immortal beast's figure was revealed. This immortal beast looked like a huge stork. There was a scarlet bulge on its head, and this bulge was covered with marks of different sizes. Around these marks, there was a boundless amount of immortal spiritual energy clustered around them. Chapter 45:17. The head of the flying dagger immortal beast was flat and slightly long, like several sickles tied together. Its long, flying sword-like beak was the blade of the sickle. The neck of the flying dagger immortal beast was extremely long, with several thick tendons entwined together. Below the neck was the body of the beast, which was covered with triangular scales. The edges of the scales were either covered with fiery red fine fur or flat feathers. Strings of sparks splashed out from within from time to time. 2 pairs of bone wings stretched out from the waist of the flying dagger immortal beast. There were very few feathers on the bone wings, only some sharp protrusions. Every protrusion had a corresponding mark. The tail of the flying dagger immortal beast was also extremely long. This tail was segmented, and as it swung, layers of mysterious crimson runes emerged from the roots and surged to the tip of the tail. The tip of the tail had some fiery red markings. The markings seemed to be on the tip of the tail, but also seemed to be in the void. It gave off an unreal feeling. As for the abdomen of the flying dagger immortal beast, the 3 sharp claws that reached into the void occasionally slashed, creating cracks in the void. Damn it! Although he had not fought with the flying dagger immortal beast yet, Xiao Hua had already sensed its power. We should let the golden-winged great rock take a look at this place. If nothing goes wrong, even the first great saint of the demon clan may not be a match for this immortal beast. Senior. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. This is the rhythm of a dead man. I remember that Zhu Qing did not say that the Star Moon Palace was so terrifying back in the Bronze Pillar country. How would Zhu Qing know the details of the Star Moon Palace? Shu Ji looked into the distance, still wanting to rush into the Yi Qiong Heavenly Palace before the flying dagger immortal beast arrived. He only said casually, if you want to find opportunities in the Star Moon Palace, how can you not pay a price? Oh, no. As he spoke, the 2 flying dagger immortal beasts in front of him suddenly accelerated and disappeared in a flash. At the same time, fiery red bubbles began to appear in the void in front of Xiao Hua and the others, like boiling water. Damn it! Fairy Xingyu cursed angrily. She rubbed her hands together in a hurry. Clusters of star-like mist mixed with brilliance fell into the void. Then, the rotating star shuttle suddenly exploded. Asterisk hong hong hong. Asterisk tens of thousands of star fragments rushed out of the star shuttle and fell towards the void, causing the surrounding space to collapse. At the same time, in front of the star fragment, layers of red flames surged out and enveloped an area of 100 miles. When the star shatter met the flames, it exploded everywhere. Fortunately, Fairy Xingyu was the first to react. The star shatter formed a kind of defense, blocking all the flames from reaching the crowd. However, in just a few breaths, a fierce aura rushed out from the flames in the distance. The space within hundreds of feet was extremely distorted. Then, the space cracked inch by inch like silk. Boom! With a loud bang, 3 sharp sword-like red claws stretched out, passing through the space and grabbing at Fairy Xingyu. Whoosh! Fairy Xingyu had been accumulating her strength for a long time. When she saw the sharp claws, she raised her hand without hesitation. Silver light rushed out from her body. Her saber, like a moon, cut across the sky and slashed at the 3 sharp claws. Clang! A golden sound suddenly rang out. Flames appeared on the flying dagger immortal beast's sharp claws. Layers of runes were split in half, and blood was faintly visible. Suddenly, with a roar, the flying dagger immortal beast's sharp mouth appeared in the space in front of Fairy Xingyu's chest. This sharp mouth broke through Fairy Xingyu's star moon saber at lightning speed and landed on Fairy Xingyu's heart. Be careful! Shuji was shocked. Just as he was about to move his body, a fierce aura descended from the sky above his head, causing Shuji's body to fall slightly. Go to the door first. Shuji did not forget Xiao Hua, who was under him. With a wave of his arm, Xiao Hua flew out like a meteor. Shuji had just thrown Xiao Hua out when 3 red claws formed a triangle and covered Shuji in the sky. Even if Shuji wanted to help Fairy Xingyu, he could not. However, at this moment, Fairy Xingyu waved her other hand again. Her saber was like a star, drawing a star curtain in front of the beast's mouth. Boom! The beast's mouth hit the star curtain and instantly broke it. Under this huge force, Fairy Xingyu's entire body flew out like a fallen leaf. Damn it! Shuji was furious. The silver light around him shone brightly. Then, with a wave of his hands, layers of thunderbolts flew out like a tide and rushed high into the sky. The thunderbolts were like a tide, but the flying dagger immortal beast's sharp claws were like reef rocks. When they fell, they shattered the thunderbolts. The moment the thunderbolts blocked the flying dagger immortal beast, a dazzling thunderbolt flashed between Shuji's eyebrows. Waves of thunderbolts flashed like spikes from within. When the ripples fell into the sky, the entire sky collapsed. An aura that was close to the will of heaven and earth overflowed from the collapse. As Shuji grabbed between his eyebrows, a light as bright as a star appeared in his hand. The light pierced through all the darkness, and the vast aura instantly filled the entire space fragment. This is a punishment celestial weapon. Even though Xiao Hua had already slowed down in midair and was about to descend, he could still easily identify the origin of the immortal artifact in Shuji's hand when the powerful aura of justice, fairness, and justice rushed past him. He could not help but groan and look up at Shuji. In the light and shadow, a punishment celestial weapon that looked like a spear appeared. The spear looked like it was only 8 feet long, but the light and shadow vaguely seemed to be submerged in the void. Endless thunderbolts appeared in the spear, and thousands of thunderbolts that revealed supreme majesty overflowed on the surface of the spear. Shuji held the spear, and without any hesitation, he stabbed it toward the top of his head. Where the spear landed, the entire space was pierced, and the space within 100 miles was also transparent. In this transparent space, another flying dagger immortal beast could be seen, and a terrifying expression appeared on its ferocious face. However, the punishment celestial weapon only pierced a few feet. Ka. A burst of ear-piercing cracking sounds came from Shuji's body. The armor on Shuji's body broke, and pieces of flesh burst out from the armor. Even the space between Shuji's eyebrows had a bloodstain that looked like a thunderbolt. In the bloodstain, White bones could be seen. Chimpage. Shuji coldly snorted, and his hand that was controlling the punishment celestial weapon did not stop. He did not care about the collapse of his body at all. He wanted to kill the flying dagger immortal beast before he was powerless. Unfortunately, wishes were always beautiful, and the things in the world would never change because of true feelings. The punishment celestial weapon only pierced another 10 feet before the thunderbolts around it were gradually extinguished. The soaring aura was also contained within the spear. What was special was that the spear rapidly shrank until it was less than a few inches long, and it automatically fell between Shuji's eyebrows. Aogg. The flying dagger immortal beast that almost died in the punishment celestial weapon suddenly let out a roar. It didn't escape, but it charged out from the void toward Shuji. Shuji hurriedly waved his hand and a spear-like celestial weapon appeared in his hand. Woo! He stabbed at the flying dagger immortal beast. Shuji rarely showed his skills, but this spear was amazing. Although the celestial weapon didn't have much celestial spiritual energy, it still dodged the flying dagger immortal beast's attack and stabbed into the flying dagger immortal beast's body from a strange angle. Boom! The flying dagger immortal beast roared angrily. Thousands of flames appeared on its scales and instantly wrapped around the celestial weapon. Moreover, the flying dagger immortal beast's huge tail swept up a gust of wind and hit Shuji's back. Facing the flying dagger immortal beast's close-range attack, the silver light around Shuji's body surged. Waves of lightning also flashed under the flying dagger immortal beast's tail. Pa pa pa. In the crisp sound, several layers of lightning were destroyed. Shuji's body was also swept by the flying dagger immortal beast's tough tail and fell like a stone. Damn it! Seeing the two celestials who had just met the two flying dagger immortal beasts and were at a disadvantage in the first exchange, Xiao Hua couldn't help but curse in a low voice. He understood that the two celestials couldn't gain any advantage in close-range combat with the flying dagger immortal beasts. However, the main reason was that the two of them were in their physical bodies and not celestial spiritual bodies. They couldn't use celestial weapons and didn't even dare to use too much celestial spiritual energy. If too much celestial spiritual energy entered their bodies, not to mention fighting with the flying dagger immortal beast, even their own physical bodies would collapse first. What should we do? Xiao Hua naturally wouldn't stand by and watch, even if his previous plan was exposed. He only pondered for a moment, and the space between his eyebrows also flashed with a dark green light. His figure also stopped and prepared to return to help. But at this moment, a sharp flying sword pierced through the void and directly fell on the top of Xiao Hua's head. This sharp and heavy was extremely heavy. Xiao Hua felt as if a huge mountain was falling from the sky. How could Xiao Hua dare to be negligent? Raising his head, he saw several three corpses in thunder. He saw that in the surrounding void, one after another, green seal text rushed out and set up a lightning array within a few li. Rumble. Just as Xiao Hua's lightning and thunder technique was used, the third flying dagger immortal beast had already pounced. This flying dagger immortal beast was clearly smaller than the previous two, but the power that rushed out was not something Xiao Hua could withstand. The flying dagger immortal beast's 3 legs fell and the beast's mouth fell, destroying the exploding 3 corpses in thunder. Even the other green seal text scattered in the space were destroyed by the flying dagger immortal beast's tail. Damn it! How is this possible? Xiao Hua finally experienced the power of the flying dagger immortal beast. He cursed loudly, even I am not a match for this flying dagger immortal beast. In the entire 3 continents, who can pass through this spatial fragment? Whoever comes will die. Although he cursed like this, Xiao Hua's body still flashed with golden light, wanting to activate his transcendence golden body. However, as the golden light flashed, countless celestial spiritual energy madly rushed in. Xiao Hua's physical body uncontrollably swelled up, while the other part produced chaotic fluctuations. The golden light flashed and disappeared. Chapter 45:18. HMPH. Xiao Hua was still unwilling to give up. More soul strands appeared between his eyebrows as he unleashed the bloodline power of God Shibai. Woo! The flying crane immortal beast seemed to have sensed Xiao Hua's abnormality and swung its huge tail at him. Amidst the whistling of the wind, the soul strands were destroyed one after another. The power of the bloodline backlash was generated from Xiao Hua's body. Alas! Xiao Hua sighed. He now understood that although he could use his soul cultivation in this space, his soul cultivation strength was far inferior to that of the flying crane immortal beast. Even if he used these soul cultivation divine abilities, he would only attract the suspicion of Fairy Xingyu and Shu Ji. He would not be able to change the situation of the battle. Since the power of the soul can't do anything, then I'll use the other most primitive power in this world, Xiao Hua thought as he waved the immortal weapon in his hand. Woo! It smashed towards the flying crane immortal beast. Peng! With a loud bang, the flying crane immortal beast's huge tail hit Xiao Hua's immortal weapon. Xiao Hua's body was flipped over and landed far away. However, the flying crane immortal beast's body also shook violently. Its previously unstoppable momentum was suppressed by this strike. Whoosh! Just as Xiao Hua was sent flying by the flying crane immortal beast, Fairy Xingyu and Shu Ji, who were also sent flying by the flying crane immortal beast, moved as well. Before their bodies landed, they immediately shot out like flying arrows and flew towards Xiao Hua's direction. Whoosh! The phalanx immortal beast landed in the sky. It no longer needed to flap its wings, but with a flap of its 3 legs, it chased after the 2 cultivators like a shooting star. Its 2 beak-like beaks even tore through the sky and bit down on the 2 cultivators. The flying crane immortal beast's beak was so powerful that with one bite, it devoured the space within 100 feet. Naturally, Shu Ji and Fairy Xingyu's bodies were also devoured. Even before their bodies arrived, the silver light on the surface of their bodies had already entered the beast's mouth. Damn it! Fairy Xingyu panicked. She raised her hand and threw out an unknown immortal artifact. Then, she flicked her finger. Boom! The immortal artifact exploded in the collapsed space behind her. Although it was not refined by Fairy Xingyu and the power of the explosion was much weaker, the force of the explosion still shattered the collapsed space. However, right at this moment, the spearhawk closed its mouth and the explosion and void disappeared. When it opened its mouth again, everything was gone. This is the power of the flying crane immortal beast. Fairy Xingyu was also shocked. She thought to herself, I'm afraid that it's really as recorded in the ancient books of the Palace of Justice. Only the energy-gathering celestial has the power to win. However, while Fairy Xingyu was still in shock, she used the previous explosion and the shockwave to fly far away. What Fairy Xingyu could think of and do, Shu Ji could do as well. Shu Ji did not wait to land. With a wave of his hand, several thunderbolts roared and rushed out. He also moved close to the ground. At this time, Shu Ji did not care about the collapse of his body. Silver light danced on the surface of his body like a flickering shadow. In the blink of an eye, he was more than 1,000 feet away. Woo! The flying crane immortal beast that attacked Shu Ji swept its tail. The entire space was filled with the explosive sound of immortal spirit chi. The space was split open by the flying crane immortal beast. Shu Ji didn't dare to fight anymore. He raised his hands and 2 lightning swords shot out. Although they only managed to shatter a few of the scales on the tail, Shu Ji had already reversed the force from the tail. Using the ingenious method of borrowing force to counteract force, he accelerated once again. Woo! Seeing that Shu Ji and Fairy Xingyu had dodged the 2 attacks and took the opportunity to escape, the 2 flying crane immortal beasts were furious. They spread their wings and rushed into the air. In a flash, they flew above the 2 people. Then, the top of the 2 flying crane immortal beasts' heads lit up. The red bulge suddenly shone brightly. Dozens of fist-sized flames flew out from this light and covered Shu Ji and Fairy Xingyu. When these dozens of flames fell into the air, immortal spirit chi immediately poured in. The flames suddenly turned into pillars of fire and fell with a loud bang, trying to imprison Shu Ji and Fairy Xingyu. Damn it! It's really like a tiger being bullied by a dog. Fairy Xingyu was really angry. Even if the flying crane immortal beasts were powerful, when had she ever been bullied to this extent by immortal beasts? She could not help but curse. The silver light around her was activated like a waterfall. The star blade and the moon blade in her hands swung out respectively. The saber light was like lightning, immediately splitting several pillars of fire. Even the star shuttle that was flying with Fairy Xingyu pierced into one of the pillars of fire and destroyed it. However, just as these pillars of fire were extinguished, a slightly cold flame seeped into Fairy Xingyue's silver light and quickly entered her body. Oh no! Fairy Xingyue was really anxious when she saw the flame invading her body. She did not care about destroying the pillars of fire anymore. She pointed her thumb at the top of her head. Poof! The brilliance of the stars and moon poured down like a spring, protecting her body. The brilliance rushed toward the flame, trying to extinguish it. Just as Fairy Xingyue was trying to save herself, the flying crane immortal beast's thick tail swept down from the void again, aiming for Fairy Xingyue's chest. Now that Fairy Xingyue was in danger, how could Shu Ji, who only had 40% of his cultivation in the immortal world, escape? The sparks that flowed out of the flying crane immortal beast's head turned into pillars of fire that trapped Shu Ji. Shu Ji waved the lightning in his hand and destroyed several pillars of fire in front of him. Suddenly, he realized that the flame was like flowing water, following the lightning in his hand and invading his body. Shu Ji did not hesitate at all. With one hand like a knife, he cut off his other hand from his body. At the same time, he opened his mouth and a thunder talisman surrounded by lightning was about to spit out. However, the flying crane immortal beast's 3 legs fell from 3 directions. Shu Ji did not know how many of them his thunder talisman could block. At this critical moment, the cries of the flying kite immortal beasts rang out once more. 2 even larger flying kite immortal beasts descended from the sky above the blazing sky palace. Damn it! Shu Ji and Fairy Xingyue were shrouded in the shadows of the flying crane immortal beasts. It was as if the shadow of death had fallen. Both of them were disheartened. However, just as the 2 of them looked at each other with despair in their eyes, a strange sound rang out again. Ga ga ga! Shu Ji and Fairy Xingyue were stunned. When they looked above them again, they were ecstatic. This was because the next 2 flying crane immortal beasts' legs did not land on Shu Ji and Fairy Xingyue, but on the backs of the first 2 flying crane immortal beasts. The 2 flying crane immortal beasts, who were determined to kill Shu Ji and Fairy Xingyue, did not dare to kill them. They spread their wings and swung their tails high into the sky, crushing the space within a few hundred feet to meet the 6 sharp claws. The sharp claws collided with the tails. Amidst the roar, the 2 smaller flying crane immortal beasts tumbled violently in the air. The larger flying crane immortal beast showed no mercy. Its sharp claws danced and grabbed the 2 smaller flying crane immortal beasts' backs, instantly tearing off some of their scales. The 2 smaller flying crane immortal beasts also swung their claws while tumbling, waiting for an opportunity to counterattack. Damn it, this is what it means to meet a worthy opponent. You guys have a good fight. Of course, Shu Ji and Fairy Xingyue did not think that the 2 flying crane immortal beasts had come to save them. However, at this moment, their eyes were filled with ecstasy. They looked at each other and muttered to themselves. Then, they sneaked past the pillars of fire that had not yet been extinguished and flew toward Xiaohua. Ow! The 2 smaller flying crane immortal beasts were no match for the flying crane immortal beast. After a few rounds, they were already drenched in blood. One of them could not help but cry out in a low voice. While Xiaohua was sent flying by the flying crane immortal beast, the flying crane immortal beast was also blocked in midair. The flying crane immortal beast was stunned at first, then its bestial nature erupted. Its wings flapped crazily, and 3 sharp claws slammed down like rain, wanting to slap Xiaohua, this little thing, to death. Seeing that the flying crane immortal beast did not activate its flames and only used its sharp claws, Xiaohua was overjoyed. He waved his immortal weapon with both hands and used the ethereal steps. He used the sky-piercing staff technique to fight the flying crane immortal beast. Although Xiaohua was powerful now and was not restricted by the 9 levels of essence force of the 3 continents in this space fragment, he could not be compared to the essence-gathering immortal that Fairy Xingyue had imagined. After fighting with the flying crane immortal beast's sharp claws for a while, he already felt weak and numb. The flying crane immortal beast took advantage of the chaos and swung its claws at Xiao Hua's body. Xiao Hua's body, which was incomparably tough in the Thousand Demons sacred realm, was as weak as mud under the flying crane immortal beast's claws. Several bloody marks instantly appeared. While Xiao Hua was greatly shocked, his figure swayed, and he just dodged the sharp claws when the flying crane immortal beast roared and opened its mouth. The space above Xiao Hua's head was swallowed up, and an extremely powerful suction force enveloped Xiao Hua along with the ground. Seeing that the ground nearby was about to be torn apart, some corpses on the ground were being sucked in, and even some immortal weapons were being swallowed by the flying crane immortal beast. Xiao Hua was quick-witted. He waved the immortal weapon in his hand and picked up the armor, immortal weapons, and other items within a radius of several hundred feet. He swept them into the flying crane immortal beast's mouth and used the momentum to escape into the distance. Boom boom. The flying crane immortal beast's suction force was very powerful. The armor and other items that fell into the beast's mouth all exploded. However, the explosions were like fireworks, and even though Xiao Hua tried his best to escape, he still couldn't escape the range of the flying crane immortal beast's suction force. Bang! 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 Xiao Hua's face went pale, and in his panic, he circulated his soul technique once more, causing string after string of three-corpse yin lightning to appear behind him. Unfortunately, even an immortal artifact was unable to cause any waves in the mouth of the Skyhawk, so what effect could these top-grade Dharma techniques of the cultivation world have? The three corpses' yin lightning only stopped the flying crane immortal beast for a moment before the beast's mouth came down again. What made Xiao Hua most sullen was that one of the flying crane immortal beast's claws had reached his back at some point. Rip! Not only did it tear apart Xiao Hua's star armor and daoist robe, it also knocked Xiao Hua to the ground. His body rolled on the ground, and the Grand Ascension stage human race's face was completely swept away. Chapter 45:19. At this point, Xiao Hua could no longer consider hiding anything. His mind was about to enter the space, ready to summon daoist witch, celestial being, and the others to fight. It was also at this moment, rumble. Huge thunderbolts surged over like a flood. Swish swish swish. After the thunderbolts, the light pillars of stars and moons also crazily bombarded. The pillars of lightning, starlight, and moonlight all entered the mouth of the flying crane immortal beast, temporarily dispersing the enormous devouring power. Roar! The flying phalanx immortal beast was furious. It raised its head and let out a long howl. Its angry gaze shifted away from Xiao Hua's body, which was rolling like a pellet, and looked behind it. In the sky, Shuji and Fairy Xingyu had quietly arrived. They each used their immortal spiritual power to save Xiao Hua. The flying crane immortal beast spread its wings, and the entire space was filled with crimson flames. The bulge on its forehead was also flashing with brilliance. Fairy Xingyu secretly complained, while Shuji roared, "Xingyu, you and I split up. I will lead the flying crane immortal beast to another place. You take Xiao Hua and rush into the Heaven's Palace." Fairy Xingyu gritted her teeth and said, "All right, be careful." Just as Shuji was about to fly up, another anxious roar came from behind Shuji and Fairy Xingyu. The flying crane immortal beast that was pouncing towards Shuji and Fairy Xingyu was startled and looked up into the distance. Shuji saw this and hurriedly descended, quietly hiding beside a corpse. Fairy Xingyu also slowly descended. Sure enough, before Fairy Xingyu could hide herself, the flying crane immortal beast roared and flapped its wings, flying towards the battle in the distance. "Let's go." Shuji saw that the flying crane immortal beast had just flown away, and his figure immediately moved, rushing towards Xiao Hua like a wisp of smoke. At this moment, Xiao Hua was in an extremely sorry state. The bronze-colored skin on his back was exposed. Streaks of blood seemed to be facing outwards. Although there was no blood seeping out, the wounds were slowly wriggling and couldn't heal very quickly. Looking at Xiao Hua's body, he was stained with some mud. Although he was holding an immortal artifact in his hand, his arm was still slightly trembling. Clearly, he had used too much strength. Shuji flew over his head, and without even looking at him, he grabbed him with his big hand. His figure fell rapidly again, and his flying speed also decreased. Damn it, what do I need that piece of junk for? Fairy Xingyu, who had originally been following Shu Ji, overtook him all of a sudden. She looked at the immortal weapon Xiao Hua was talking about and said in a low voice, "Even if you have it, you are no match for the winged crane immortal beast. Big sister." Xiao Hua laughed bitterly and said, "With this, I might not be able to defeat the flying crane immortal beast, but I can at least preserve my life. If you don't have it, you can only collect my corpse. Quick!" Shuji had been paying attention to what was behind him. At this moment, he urged loudly, "Xingyue, don't say any more. The flying crane immortal beast has already noticed that we have left." Hearing this, Fairy Xingyu naturally turned her head back. Sure enough, with the addition of the last Nimbus immortal beast, the situation of the battle immediately became complicated. In just a moment, the two larger Nimbus immortal beasts were also injured by the three Nimbus immortal beasts. They had no choice but to slow down their attacks. Now that the battle had slowed down, the phalanx immortal beasts thought of their prey and looked at Shu Ji and the others. "I'll help you." Fairy Xingyu did not dare to be negligent. She raised her hand and waved it, and a huge hand of stars and moon fell. Together with Shu Ji, she grabbed Xiao Hua and rushed to the gate of the Heaven's Mansion with Xiao Hua. Ow! Seeing that their prey was escaping, the two larger Nimbus immortal beasts spread their wings and pounced at Shu Ji and the others with a roar. Boom! Unfortunately, before they could fly more than 300 meters, the three smaller Nimbus immortal beasts were even faster. They fell from the top of the two Nimbus immortal beasts' heads and smashed their tails mercilessly on the necks of the two Nimbus immortal beasts. The two Nimbus immortal beasts were furious. They curled their tails and stretched out their sharp claws again. Ka. With an ear-piercing sound, another Nimbus immortal beast's scales were torn and fell. In an instant, the five Nimbus immortal beasts were fighting again. Phew! Xiao Hua was taken to the gate of the Heaven's Mansion by the two immortals. When he turned around and saw the five Nimbus immortal beasts fighting, he could not help but let out a long sigh of relief. He could not help but cry out, "Damn it, this kind of space fragment. No cultivator on the three continents can walk out alive, right?" "Of course." Fairy Xingyu sneered. "Even we have to suffer under the sharp claws of the Nimbus immortal beasts. How can others leave alive?" Shuji also said with lingering fear, "I guess, this is also the reason why the Star Moon Palace disappeared from the three continent." Millimeter. Fairy Xingyu nodded. "I was also surprised earlier. Since the three continents have tokens to enter and exit the Star Moon Palace, there is no reason why there is no news about the Star Moon Palace. I guess the cultivators who entered the Star Moon Palace in the past were unlucky enough to encounter these Nimbus immortal beasts. Or maybe there are other Nimbus immortal beasts that are even more powerful. They were all wiped out here, leaving no clues behind. Oh, no. Quick." She had only said a few words when the battle between the five Nimbus immortal beasts came to an end. Another Nimbus immortal beast rushed out of the battle and pounced on Shu Ji and the others. At this time, Shu Ji and the others were only a few hundred meters away from the Yi Qiong Heavenly Mansion. "Let's fight." Shu Ji roared and the silver light around him shone brightly. Fairy Xingyu was anxious and shouted, "Shu Ji, don't." Before she could finish speaking, lightning flashed under Shu Ji's feet and pieces of flesh and blood dripped down. His flying speed increased greatly as he carried Xiao Hua. Seeing that Shu Ji's fight was to speed up, Fairy Xingyu finally heaved a sigh of relief. She also hurriedly urged the remaining immortal qi to speed up. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Even Shu Ji and Fairy Xingyu were not as fast as the Nimbus immortal beasts, let alone Xiao Hua, who was carrying a heavy object. The three of them had only flown a few hundred meters. When they were halfway there, the Nimbus immortal beasts had already caught up. This time, the two groups of Nimbus immortal beasts had a tacit understanding. Two of the larger Nimbus immortal beasts rushed toward Shu Ji, while the three Nimbus immortal beasts that came first pounced on Fairy Xingyu. Xiao Hua was already regarded as an easy prey. Seeing that the five Nimbus immortal beasts were waving their sharp claws at Shu Ji and Fairy Xingyu's heads, Xiao Hua's heart skipped a beat. He hurriedly shouted, leave me behind, run away from the palace gate, and run in the opposite direction. Shuji and Fairy Xingyu were stunned and immediately understood. They looked at each other and urged their immortal qi on their arms at the same time. They threw Xiao Hua toward the palace gate, turned around, and rushed into the distance. Seeing that the three of them had separated, the 5 Nimbus immortal beasts were obviously stunned. However, they did not have much time to think about it. Shuji and Fairy Xingyu sped up. Just as one of the Nimbus immortal beasts was about to pounce on Xiao Hua, the other 2 Nimbus immortal beasts roared and stopped the Nimbus immortal beasts from splitting up. As a result, the 5 Nimbus immortal beasts turned their wings and flew toward Shuji and Fairy Xingyu. Xiao Hua's figure landed on the ground without a trace of stagnation. He flew toward the gate of the heavens abode like flowing water. It was only a distance of a few hundred meters. In the past, he could cover it with just a few steps. Now, it was a matter of life and death. Boom! Xiao Hua had just flown halfway when he heard a roar behind him. Xiao Hua panicked. Damn it, aren't these Nimbus immortal beasts too powerful? Sure enough, when he looked back, Shuji and Fairy Xingyu were already tumbling in the air and flying toward the palace gate. At this time, Xiao Hua himself had not reached the palace gate. Shuji and Fairy Xingyu heard Xiao Hua's words and immediately came to their senses. They threw Xiao Hua aside and flew in the opposite direction of the palace gate. After flying for a while, the 5 Nimbus immortal beasts had already flown above their heads and their sharp claws slammed down. At this time, Shuji and Fairy Xingyu had a tacit understanding and swapped their positions. The exchange between the two of them was easy, but the attack of the 5 Nimbus immortal beasts was not easy to distinguish. Ka. The wings of the 2 groups of Nimbus immortal beasts collided almost at the same time. In an instant, the 5 Nimbus immortal beasts pounced on each other again. Of course, this time, the Nimbus immortal beasts had learned their lesson. After swapping positions, they split up again and swung their tails at Shuji and Fairy Xingyu. Shuji and Fairy Xingyu had quietly retreated a little when the Nimbus immortal beasts were fighting. When they saw the huge tails sweeping toward them, they were overjoyed and activated their immortal artifacts to block them. Boom boom! 2 loud sounds rang out in succession. Shuji and Fairy Xingyu were sent flying by the huge tails. Wasn't the direction of the Heaven's Abode Palace Gate? Damn it! Although the 2 immortals seemed to be in a sorry state, they were about to crash into the Heaven's Abode like meteors. Xiao Hua was still thousands of feet away from the Heaven's Abode Palace. Then, he rolled his eyes and raised his hand to pick up the immortal artifact. He pushed against the ground and exerted force in his hand. Woo! His whole body flew straight for more than 100 feet and landed on the ground. Then, Xiao Hua stumbled and ran for a few more feet. Once again, he pushed against the ground and his body flew again. After a few more times, and with Xiao Hua's secret soul cultivation flying technique, he managed to chase Shuji and Fairy Xingyu back. Rise! Seeing Xiao Hua push himself up again, Shuji and Fairy Xingyu understood. They stretched out their hands at the same time and grabbed Xiao Hua's body with their immortal qi. Then, the 3 of them rushed through the gate of the Heaven's Abode Palace. At this time, the sharp claws of the flying crane immortal beast had already fallen. With a swoosh, Xiao Hua's back was torn apart again. Woo! The 3 of them fell into the gate of the Heaven's Abode Palace. Shuji and Fairy Xingyu let go of Xiao Hua at the same time. Xiao Hua's body drew an arc in the air and landed on the ground of the main hall. Amidst the whistling of the wind, there was a series of clattering sounds. Xiao Hua's slightly clumsy body smashed the corpses on the ground into a mess. Shuji and Fairy Xingyu also staggered to the ground. Not only were their faces abnormally pale, but there were also some drops of sweat dripping from their foreheads and necks. Fairy Xingyu stood on the ground and wiped her forehead with her hand. Looking at the sweat, she smiled bitterly and said, "Is this sweat? I can't remember the last time I sweated." Chapter 45-20. Shuji ignored Fairy Xingyu. He released his thought extending and scanned the ground. When his thought extending landed on a corpse, He hurried over and picked up a box-like fairy weapon from the corpse. As his thought extending past, he took out a thumb-sized elixir. However, he just looked at it, then threw it on the ground and said, "Although these elixirs are useful, we can't take them." "What a pity. Shuji, take this first." Fairy Xingyu smiled, took out a jade bottle, and threw it to Shuji. Shuji was slightly stunned. He took the jade bottle with a wry smile, took out a blue elixir, and swallowed it. Then, he sat cross-legged on the ground and adjusted his breathing. Fairy Xingyu looked at Xiao Hua, took out another jade bottle and swallowed it. Then, she looked at Xiao Hua and asked, "Xiao Hua, these elixirs I refined are not suitable for you. Your injuries seem to be superficial. As long as you get out of this space fragment, you should be able to heal yourself, right?" "Senior, you're right." Xiao Hua nodded. "I don't need to waste elixirs. This junior will stand guard for the seniors." "No need. It's safe in the Heaven Mansion now." Fairy Xingyu said with a smile, "Those Nimbus immortal beasts don't dare to enter. You should rest for a while. We'll discuss." Unfortunately, before Fairy Xingyu could finish speaking, another roar of the Nimbus immortal beasts came from outside the door. Then, a gust of wind and flames rushed in from outside the door. The smaller Nimbus immortal beast was the first to rush in. "How is that possible?" Startled, Fairy Xingyu cried out, "If these flying jade immortal beasts could rush into the Heaven Mansion, the Heaven Mansion would have been in a mess. Now, there are no traces of the Nimbus immortal beasts coming in and out of the Heaven Mansion. They obviously don't dare to come in. Maybe they couldn't before." Shuji suddenly opened his eyes, glanced at the Nimbus immortal beasts rushing in, and said, "They didn't even dare to get close to the Heaven Mansion. Now, I'm afraid they don't have any scruples. The Heaven Mansion is going to suffer." Hiss. Although Shuji said Yi Qiong Heavenly Prefecture, Fairy Xingyu knew what he meant. When the three of them arrived at the Yi Qiong Heavenly Prefecture, the entire Heavenly Prefecture did not show any signs of being destroyed by the flying crane immortal beast. Clearly, the aura of the corpses of the two celestial venerables had forced them to stay away. Now that they had collected the corpses of the two celestial venerables, the aura of the two celestial venerables had disappeared. Naturally, the phalanx immortal beasts could approach the immortal mansion without fear. Although there was a restriction around the immortal mansion, it was limited to the surroundings. They didn't know how to activate the restriction in front of the door, so the phalanx immortal beasts could enter the immortal mansion. Motherf *K. Even this so-called heavenly abode can't stop the flying kite immortal beast. Are we all going to die here? This shard of the celestial realm is really killing me. Xiao Hua was even more shocked, and he cursed furiously in his heart. But he didn't dare dally, and he waved his immortal artifact to greet them while he said, "Senior, quickly heal your injuries. I'll obstruct them for a while. Get out of the way." How could Shuji still care about healing? He hurriedly got up and shouted, "Xiao Hua, you're no match for them." As he spoke, Shuji raised his hand and grabbed. A shadow condensed from lightning had already passed through his hand and landed on the flying kite immortal beast. Whoosh! How could the flying kite immortal beast be afraid of this shadow? It opened its mouth and spat out a crimson pillar of fire, which collided with the palm shadow. With a boom, the pillar of fire was annihilated, and the shadow also disappeared. That powerful airflow almost flipped Xiao Hua over. Ow! At this time, behind the flying kite immortal beast, another flying kite immortal beast was obviously bigger. It seemed to be another group. Xingyue. Shuji raised his head and looked around, then shouted, "Let's split up and rush into the heavenly abode to see if there's a restriction to avoid the flying kite immortal beast." "Okay." Fairy Xingyue hesitated for a moment, then her figure flashed and flew in another direction. "Senior." Seeing that Shuji was coming to save him, Xiao Hua hurriedly shouted, "Although I don't have any magic power, I know the art of fighting. The main hall of the heavenly abode is not like the outside. There are pillars, corridors, and other obstacles. Although the flying kite immortal beast is powerful, it may not be able to do anything to me. Senior, you'd better hurry to the depths of the heavenly abode to find a way to kill the flying kite immortal beast. Now, there are only 5 flying kite immortal beasts. We can still deal with them. If a few more come, we'll really die without a burial place." As he spoke, Xiao Hua waved his celestial artifact again, and his figure jumped into the distance. His figure was quite agile, and he was hiding behind a huge pillar. Ow! At this time, the flying kite immortal beast had already stretched out its sharp claws to grab Shuji. The other flying kite immortal beast flapped its wings and flew toward Fairy Xingyue. "Okay." Shuji thought for a moment, then quickly retreated and shouted, "Be careful. I remember that there is a smaller hall in the depths of the heavenly abode. Go in and hide first." Crack! Just as Shuji finished speaking, the flying kite immortal beast's sharp claws had already clawed down. As Shuji dodged, the floor of the main hall was already cracked by the flying kite immortal beast's claws. Shuji looked at the entrance of the hall again, and then he flicked his finger, causing a ball of lightning to shoot out. Rumble. A huge tremor resounded, and it drew the attention of the flying crane immortal beast that was charging over from Xiao Hua, and then it urged its figure to charge towards the other side of the hall. Seeing that Shuji and Fairy Xingyue had lured the 3 flying kite immortal beasts away, Xiao Hua did not dare to be negligent. With a sweep of his mind, he put his celestial artifact into the space, and then used his soul cultivation flying technique to fly in another direction. As Xiao Hua flew, he muttered in his heart, "Seniors, don't blame me for hiding it. This is a matter of life and death. If I reveal a bit of my divine ability in front of you, I will be hunted down even if I ascend to the immortal world in the future." Just as Xiao Hua approached a huge pillar, his body fell rapidly and landed on the ground. Then, he activated his soul power, and his entire body slowly straightened and changed into a square shape. This was the transformation technique that Xiao Hua had comprehended from Qingqiu Mountain in the star-picking deck. Although this soul power was not as useful as Dao sect dharmic powers, Xiao Hua's human appearance still changed a little. Xiao Hua had just landed when the flying kite immortal beast's cries rang out behind the stone pillar. The last 2 flying kite immortal beasts also rushed into the main hall. One of them chased after Fairy Xingyue, while the other pounced on Xiao Hua. However, after the flying kite immortal beast landed, Xiao Hua's shadow was nowhere to be seen. The flying kite immortal beast's 3 legs moved step by step beside the huge pillar, and a powerful responding force swept across the ground inch by inch. The loud footsteps caused the entire hall to shake. Damn it! Xiao Hua retracted his aura, leaving only a wisp of his consciousness outside. However, this wisp of consciousness swayed like withered grass in front of the valiant Yin Yan. Xiao Hua could not help but curse angrily again. This young master has always been extremely lucky. Why is it that after arriving at the Star Moon Palace, my luck has become a complete mess? As if it had discovered something, the flying crane immortal beast approached the huge pillar with large strides. Its beak that was as hard as a crane's beak also slowly approached Xiao Hua. An extremely fishy smell that carried an indescribable heat pressed towards Xiao Hua. Admittedly, Xiao Hua had already transformed and sealed off his 5 senses. However, the aura that was mixed with the echoing will still forced its way into Xiao Hua's mind, mouth, and nose in waves. A feeling of being targeted involuntarily arose from the bottom of Xiao Hua's heart. In an instant, Xiao Hua felt a sense of regret. He had been too smart for his own good. If he had escaped earlier, the flying kite immortal beast would only have chased after him. At this moment, he was completely exposed to the flying kite immortal beast's attack range. If the flying kite immortal beast sensed that something was wrong and immediately attacked, it would be too late even if he summoned Daoist Witch, Celestial Being, and the others from the space. PFFF. At this moment, the flying kite immortal beast's sharp beak landed on Xiao Hua's back. The heat almost melted Xiao Hua's body. Xiao Hua clenched his teeth and tried his best to endure the unspeakable pain. Fortunately, the flying kite immortal beast was only suspicious. After probing for a moment, its sharp beak left again. Boom! It landed on the corpse of an immortal general not far away and shattered the armor. The immortal general's corpse also turned into nothingness in a ball of crimson fire. Ow! The flying kite immortal beast took a few steps forward. As if it was angry, it roared at the sky and swept its tail horizontally. Boom! It hit the huge pillar. The pillar shook a few times, but it didn't fall. Boom, boom, boom. The flying kite immortal beast seemed to be venting its anger. It slammed into the pillar several times. Boom. The entire pillar finally collapsed. The roof of the palace that was already tilted fell again. Crash. The huge rocks engraved with runes had lost their restrictive power. They fell one after another like rain. They hit Xiao Hua and the flying kite immortal beast. Immediately after, the flying kite immortal beast let out a few hurried cries as if it was very happy. It spread its wings and flew in another direction. In just a short moment, the entire hall returned to a state of tranquility that had lasted for countless years. However, Xiao Hua didn't move. He also didn't release his soul remembrance or consciousness. He was waiting for the flying kite immortal beast to return. After half a cup of tea's time, the entire palace didn't have any abnormalities. Xiao Hua released his soul remembrance and looked for a moment. Then, he raised his hand and pushed away the rocks that fell on him. Then, he didn't even look and flew into the distance. After flying past a few palaces, there were no more sounds. Xiao Hua stopped again. He looked around and found a platform to sit down. He thought to himself, damn it, it's too dangerous. The immortal realm is indeed not a place for people to stay. Right now, not to mention sneaking into the immortal realm through the passage of the Star Moon Palace. Even if the immortal realm's heavenly venerables invited me with 8 palanquins, I wouldn't go. I must cultivate my strength. Through ascension, I must temper my body in the spirit cleansing pool before going. Without the immortal spirit body and immortal spirit chi, I can't even defeat an immortal beast. What's the point of going to the immortal realm? Chapter 45-21. After resting for a while, Xiao Hua looked at the mess in the hall and smiled again. He, I didn't dare to plunder at will outside Heaven's mansion for fear that fairy Xingyu would see through it. Now that the flying jade immortal beast has entered Heaven's mansion, I'm afraid that the entire Heaven's mansion will be ruined by these beasts. Instead of that, it's better to let me take advantage of it. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua released his mind. Whether it was the corpses, armor, immortal tools, storage bags, or the things in Heaven's mansion, they were all collected into the space like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaf. In just a moment, the entire hall was clean as if a dog had licked it. When the hall was clean, Xiao Hua took out the wishful staff, looked around, and hit a giant pillar. Boom! The shaky roof of the hall fell, raising a burst of dust. Then, Xiao Hua moved again, walking toward the depths of Heaven's mansion. Wherever he went, he swept away everything, and the halls collapsed one by one. As for Xiao Hua's mind, he entered the space. When the figure of Jade Archive Xiao Hua appeared, the figures of Daoist Witch, Celestial Being, Demon Venerable Shi and others also appeared. Fellow Taoists. Jade Archive Xiao Hua did not delay, and told the story of the matter to his avatars. He asked straightforwardly, the situation is so urgent, do you have any good ideas? Big brother. Demon Venerable Shi shouted, I have no problem. This immortal chi conflicts with my devil chi, but I can use my means here. Forget it. Jade Archive Xiao Hua's face was black. Once the devil blade appears, there is no need to wait for me to fly to the immortal world. Shu Ji's immortal thunder will kill me. He is the punishment envoy of the punishment palace. How can he allow a cultivator with devil chi to fly to the immortal world? In that case, I can only act secretly. Daoist Witch asked faintly. Of course. Jade Archive Xiao Hua replied without hesitation. Fellow Daoist is now a taboo in the immortal world. Although I don't know the reason, we'd better not touch it. I have no problem. Celestial Being said arrogantly, the immortal chi in this space fragment has no effect on me. Fellow Daoist, there's no problem. However, Jade Archive Xiao Hua still shook his head and said, however, without that white bone, fellow Daoist wouldn't be a match for this bullshit immortal beast. However, if we take out white bone, Fairy Xingyue is a lore envoy. She has great insight and might see through our method. An. TSK, I don't need to say more. The most precious thing in this space fragment has been taken by us. When she finds out that something is wrong, she will definitely look for me. Daoist Minute smiled and said, since you can't do anything, my fellow Daoist, just keep hiding your true strength. Anyway, this heaven's abode seems to be of great importance. Shuji and Fairy Xingyue don't want you to know the details. You might as well pretend to be ignorant until the end. Playing dumb is a must. Jade Archive Xiao Hua nodded. The problem now is how to escape. It's not a big problem if it's just the 5 of them, Daoist Minute replied. In this space fragment of the immortal realm, it seems that the power of law of the 3 continents has lost its effectiveness. Fellow Daoist I and Heavenly Dao can resist the immortal beasts. If you use your divine ability, of course, you can resist them too. However, it's best to avoid Shuji and Fairy Xingyue. However, if it's as you're worried, and there are more than 5 immortal beasts in this space fragment, then it'll be troublesome. We can only rely on the 2 immortals to find the place to escape from this space fragment first. Sigh, these 2 immortals are a little too arrogant. Daoist Wu sighed and said, or they have some scruples. Before entering the Star Moon Palace, they should have discussed it with you more. That's normal. Daoist Minute smiled and said, didn't we come to the Star Moon Palace with Xiongyi, Yuanya, and the others? Should we have discussed it with them? That's true. Demon Venerable She nodded. I'm just afraid that Fairy Xingyue is hiding something that will be disadvantageous to you. Fairy Xingyue may have selfish motives, but Shuji won't. Jade Archive Xiao Hua shook his head. As long as I'm with Shuji, I don't have to worry about anything. The problem is that we're separated now. You have to be careful, big brother. Demon Venerable She seemed to have a natural resistance to immortals and reminded him. I know. Jade Archive Xiao Hua nodded. You wait for a while to discuss. I'll go out first. After saying that, Xiao Hua's mind left the space. However, after a moment, Xiao Hua's mind fell on the continent where the immortal artifacts were. Then, he raised his hand and a flying fork that was nearly 100 feet long landed in his hand. This flying fork was blue in color. When it landed in Jade Archive Xiao Hua's hand, it still gave off a chill. Looking at the sharp tip of the flying fork, where pieces of ice appeared out of thin air, Jade Archive Xiao Hua smiled and said, this immortal artifact is of the ice attribute, which is the nemesis of the immortal beasts. We'll rely on this to kill the immortal beast. Unfortunately, even if I use all my magic power, I'm afraid I won't be able to pierce through the scales of the immortal beasts. I can only rely on Shuji for this. However, Shuji's divine ability hasn't recovered yet, so he probably won't be able to fully activate this immortal artifact. I still have to add some materials. After thinking for a while, Jade Archive Xiao Hua raised his hand and several drops of Xiantian true water floated into the air. As Jade Archive Xiao Hua raised his hand and grabbed, the Xiantian true water fell into the spikes of the flying fork. After finishing his preparations, Jade Archive Xiao Hua left the space again. However, he didn't bring the flying fork out of the space. He casually knocked over another stone pillar and the entire palace collapsed. Xiao Hua stepped into a collapsed palace. The roof of this palace was long gone. The broken pillars, some huge rocks, and the jade table all fell into the dust. Xiao Hua looked around. His mind was like quicksilver as he put the jade table, pearls, and other things into the space. Then, he turned around and looked outside the palace. Outside the palace was an even more spacious courtyard. There were many immortal herbs and immortal trees that Xiao Hua didn't recognize. Moreover, because the restrictions of the heavenly abode were damaged during the battle, these immortal trees and immortal herbs weren't protected by any restrictions at all. They looked as if they could be picked by anyone. Seeing this, Xiao Hua's eyes lit up. He flew in front of a stalk of immortal grass. Just as he was about to reach out and grab it, he thought for a moment and stopped. After thinking for a bit, his mind entered the space again. When he came out, Xiaoguo also came out. Xiaoguo's body in the immortal spiritual energy was as he expected. Her spiritwood body wasn't affected by the immortal spiritual energy and didn't have any special discomfort. Xiao Hua was overjoyed and said in a low voice, Xiaoguo, I'll leave this place too. Hey, Xiaoguo, what's wrong? Could it be that you can't stay in this space for a long time? No, no. Xiao Guo's small body trembled like a sieve. His red face was now as white as snow. His eyes flickered with extreme fear as he looked at the top of Xiao Hua's head behind his back, stuttering as he spoke. Seeing this, Xiao Hua's heart tightened even though he didn't have any warning signs in his heart. His mind wrapped around Xiao Guo and he desperately urged his soul power. His body didn't move at all as he flew into the distance. Woo! Xiao Hua's body had just moved when a gust of wind appeared behind Xiao Hua. 3 scarlet-red claws of the flying crane immortal beast stretched out from the void and directly fell on Xiao Hua's back. Slash! Boom! Xiao Hua was indeed quick to react and left a string of afterimages in the air. However, one of the kite immortal beast's sharp claws still landed on his back. Amidst the sound, Xiao Hua's back was torn apart and his muscles were torn apart. The other 2 claws even scratched the ground and created a crack that was several meters long. At this moment, the kite immortal beast that was hidden in the void finally revealed itself and landed heavily on the ground. Damn it! Xiao Hua narrowly escaped a calamity. The sharp pain in his back pierced his heart. He angrily cursed. He knew in his heart that it was definitely him who pushed down the palace and attracted the flying crane immortal beast's attention. The flying crane immortal beast was lying in ambush in the void in advance, waiting for him to fall into its trap. If he didn't see the courtyard filled with immortal herbs and had the sudden idea to come out from the collapsed palace, he would have already been killed by the flying crane immortal beast. Looking at the flying crane immortal beast again, after its attack missed, it swept its huge tail again. At the same time, several immortal trees were broken and the space was torn apart. Xiao Hua didn't have time to put Xiao Guo into the space. He casually threw her to the ground and clenched his fists. Woo! He faced the flying crane immortal beast head-on. Pu. First, there were 2 muffled sounds. Xiao Hua's fists had hit the flying crane immortal beast's tail. At the same time, boom boom boom. A series of explosions sounded. Xiao Hua's body was hit by the flying crane immortal beast's tail and flew horizontally like a meteor. In an instant, he pierced through more than 10 stone walls and disappeared after raising a cloud of dust. Oh! The flying crane immortal beast roared loudly. It seemed to be excited. It flapped its wings and its huge body also moved. It followed Xiao Hua's direction and pounced. Everywhere the flying crane immortal beast passed, more than 10 stone walls were completely destroyed by the flying crane immortal beast. That continuous palace once again collapsed with a loud bang. Whoosh! Not only that, the flying crane immortal beast rushed out 100 feet and opened its mouth again. A crimson pillar of fire shot out from the cave that Xiao Hua had pierced through. The stone walls and pillars all melted and disappeared in this pillar of fire. Roar! While the flying crane immortal beast was frantically attacking, it heard Xiao Hua's roar. Suddenly, he rushed out from behind a stone pillar and waved the wishful steel staff in his hand. Boom! It smashed into the flying crane immortal beast's claws. In the huge roar, the flying crane immortal beast's claws trembled slightly. A layer of marks on it suddenly flashed with red light. A great impact force was generated. Not only did it block Xiao Hua's wishful steel staff, but the remaining force was not exhausted. Xiao Hua's figure was sent flying upside down in mid-air. Shua! The flying crane immortal beast waved its claws very fiercely. Without waiting for Xiao Hua to fly more than 10 feet, it hit Xiao Hua's chest again. Xiao Hua's body collapsed and his whole figure was once again sent flying like gravel. Chapter 45-22. Roar! The flying crane immortal beast's figure flashed, leaving behind a string of afterimages as it chased after Xiao Hua. This time, its tail pierced towards Xiao Hua's chest from the bottom. At the tip of the tail, a sharp cone-like protrusion flashed with red light. Even the space was about to be burned into fragments by the red light. Although Xiao Hua's figure was unbalanced in the air, his expression changed greatly when he saw the flying crane immortal beast's tail piercing towards him. His entire body curled up in the air, and a vortex of afterimages bloomed in the air. The flying crane immortal beast's tail pierced into one of the vortexes. Whoosh! At the same time, Xiao Hua's figure appeared in another place. He did not stop at all, and like flowing water, he rushed into the flying crane immortal beast's body. Without waiting for the flying crane immortal beast's sharp claws to attack, Xiao Hua had already landed on the flying crane immortal beast's body. With a shake of his hand, the immortal tool that condensed the innate primordial water was already in his hand. He raised his arm and was about to stab it into the flying crane immortal beast's back. At this moment, the markings on the flying crane immortal beast's scales lit up, and the fur or feathers between the scales began to move. This movement was very strange. It was like the beating of a drum, and the space around Xiao Hua was trembling. Not good. Seeing the powerful fluctuations in the space, how could Xiao Hua care about killing the flying crane immortal beast? He growled and hurriedly urged his soul power to escape from the flying crane immortal beast's body. Boom! Just as Xiao Hua left, tens of thousands of flames flew out from the void and connected with the red light on the flying crane immortal beast's scales. A sea of fire enveloped the surrounding space of a few hundred feet. Damn it! Xiao Hua had already used the fire origin to temper his body, but when he touched the fire of the immortal realm, his body showed signs of melting. It seemed like he did not dare to take the risk. Xiao Hua cursed and crashed into the damaged palace. How could the flying crane immortal beast let Xiao Hua go? It roared and also crashed into the palace. The palaces of the heavenly abode collapsed one after another, like an earth dragon rolling under the ground. Translator, Atlas Studios editor. Atlas Studios Shuji and Fairy Xingyu were also chased to the left by the gallium immortal beast. Hearing the collapsing stone walls, Shuji's expression changed and he transmitted his voice. Xingyue, quick, Xiao Hua is being chased by the gallium immortal beast. All right. Fairy Xingyu scanned the area with her mind and saw that there were two celestial phalanx beasts behind Shuji. She knew that Xiao Hua was also targeted by the celestial phalanx beasts. She did not dare to be careless. With a flash, she crossed the courtyard outside the hall and was about to rush over. However, just as she passed by, she suddenly frowned and her gaze fell on the ground. However, she only glanced at it for a moment before the fire pillar behind her attacked her. Fairy Xingyue had no choice but to dodge it. On the other side of the hall, Shuji's body was also flickering with silver light and lightning as he quickly rushed over. However, when Shuji and Fairy Xingyue rushed into the main hall and saw the situation inside, they couldn't help but gasp. Their hearts were completely cold. At this time, Xiao Hua had been smashed into the stone wall by the flying crane immortal beast with its tail. Half of his body was embedded in the wall. Except for the huge flying fork in his left arm, which could still move, the rest of his body was riddled with injuries. Damn it! Shuji was shocked and did not hesitate to activate his immortal chi. However, even if an immortal had arrived, it was already too late. The flying crane immortal beast turned its head slightly and glanced at Shuji and Fairy Xingyu. Roar! It opened its mouth and tried to devour Xiao Hua. However, the entire space in front of Xiao Hua was distorted. The stone wall where Xiao Hua was located shook violently. Everything was covered by the devouring power of the flying crane immortal beast. Xiao Hua's hands and feet were also swaying in the wind like withered branches. At this moment, Xiao Hua suddenly moved. He waved the flying fork in his left hand, and the huge flying fork flew into the flying crane immortal beast's mouth faster than a meteor. Unsurprisingly, the flying fork fell into the flying crane immortal beast's mouth along with some gravel. As soon as the flying fork fell in, the flying crane immortal beast was shocked, as if it had sensed something. Without any hesitation, the phalanx immortal beast let out a deep roar as a crimson flame burst out of its mouth. It would have been fine if the flame had not been born. As soon as it was born, a huge explosion came from the flying crane immortal beast's body. Moreover, this explosion sounded like firecrackers, from its slender neck to its tail. Following this explosion, the flying crane immortal beast's neck exploded, and its body exploded. Even its tail exploded. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere. The flying crane immortal beast, which even an immortal could not kill, turned into blood clots just like that. How is this possible? Shuji and Fairy Xingyu were not the only ones who were stunned on the spot. They looked at Xiao Hua, who seemed to be on the verge of death, in disbelief. Even the 4 flying crane immortal beasts stopped in mid-air, not knowing what to do. However, in just a moment, the blood chi on the flying crane immortal beast's corpse aroused the bestial nature of the 4 flying crane immortal beasts. The flying crane immortal beasts roared and pounced on Shuji and Fairy Xingyu again. Rumble. Shuji urged the lightning to fight with the flying crane immortal beast. Fairy Xingyu also waved the star saber and the moon saber to resist. For a moment, there was chaos, and no one paid attention to Xiao Hua. Damn it, I finally found the flying crane immortal beast's weakness. Xiao Hua could have escaped, but at this time, he was indeed a little weak and numb, so he simply hid on the stone wall and pretended to be dead. His mind had already entered the space. On one hand, he was looking for an ice-type immortal weapon, and on the other, he was refining the innate primordial water to the sharp points of the immortal weapons. After refining the 4 immortal weapons, Xiao Hua naturally couldn't give them to Shuji and Fairy Xingyu in front of them. He just threw the 4 immortal weapons far away, waiting for an opportunity to remind them. Just as Xiao Hua was thinking about how to open his mouth, the 4 flying jade immortal beasts suddenly stopped. Then, they raised their heads and looked towards a certain direction at the same time. Finally, they let out a few cries in unison and spread their wings. They actually abandoned Shuji and Fairy Xingyu and broke through the roof of the heavenly abode. They flew into the sky and disappeared in a moment. Phew! Xiao Hua let out a long breath, feeling as if he had just survived a disaster. As Shuji rushed into the sky, he released his spiritual sense to investigate and ordered Fairy Xingyu to rescue Xiao Hua. Fairy Xingyu pulled Xiao Hua out of the stone wall. Xiao Hua took the opportunity to fall to the ground like a pile of mud. He looked at Fairy Xingyu and said, "Elder sister, you'd better not save me. Let me die. This space fragment is already so dangerous. Even the immortal beasts in your immortal realm are so powerful. How can we go to the other space fragments?" Fairy Xingyu also put away her previous smile and nodded. "You're right. This space fragment is really too strange. This Star Moon Palace is also different from what we thought before. Then we should retreat first and go to the other space fragments. Can't we?" Xiao Hua suggested. "Instead of retreating, it's better to go forward." Fairy Xingyu answered without hesitation. At this time, Shuji landed and said in disbelief, "These flying crane immortal beasts really left. It's really strange." "There's nothing strange about it," Fairy Xingyu replied. "There are only 2 possibilities. First, there are not only 5 flying crane immortal beasts in this space fragment, but also other flying crane immortal beasts in group. And this possibility is very high. I remember that flying crane immortal beasts always appear in groups. Second, the 4 great families and the great demons of the demon clan have also stepped into this space fragment. They have many people and are weak. Naturally, they will be easily discovered by the flying crane immortal beast. No matter what the possibility is, now that the flying crane immortal beasts have indeed left, we should quickly find the location of this space fragment," Xiao Hua urged. Hearing this, Shuji looked at Fairy Xingyu. Fairy Xingyu smiled bitterly and said, "The space fragment and the meteor belt seem to be opposite from each other from the outside. However, inside the space fragment, these 2 positions don't necessarily have to be opposite. And no one knows where this position is. Sometimes it's at the top of a mountain, sometimes it's at the seaside, and sometimes it's in a cave. However, this place usually has the power of the stars and moon seeping out. I can use the star shuttle to find the approximate location. Big sister, hurry up and activate it." Thinking of how Fairy Xingyu did not say anything after entering the space fragment, and how she was not in a hurry, Xiao Hua could not help but feel a little anxious and urged her. "When I entered the space fragment, I already activated the star shuttle." Fairy Xingyu smiled bitterly and said, "But at that time, I didn't find the location of the exit." "Ah, you activated the star shuttle at that time to find the exit?" Xiao Hua was dumbfounded. Although he was confused by Fairy Xingyu's smile at that time, he still had some impression of it. He thought that Fairy Xing Yu was just testing the immortal qi in the space fragment. He did not expect that she was looking for the exit. Fairy Xing Yu glared at Xiao Hua and said, "Then what did you think I was doing? The immortal qi in Shu Ji's and my body is very precious. How could I use it casually? Big sister, what about now?" Xiao Hua asked again. "The situation is urgent now. No matter how precious the immortal qi is, you have to activate it. Do you think I don't want to activate the star shuttle? I want to activate it too," Fairy Xing Yu said helplessly, "but the immortal qi used to activate the star shuttle to find the exit is far from what is used to attack. I can't activate a large amount of immortal qi at this time, or my body will collapse." Alas, okay. Xiao Hua had already seen some blood flowing under Shu Ji's armor. He knew that what Fairy Xing Yu said was true. He sighed and said, "Senior, quickly take some pills to heal your injuries." "Okay." Fairy Xing Yu nodded and took another pill. After she sat down, Shu Ji looked at the ruins around him and said, "You two rest here. Be careful and hide yourselves. I'll go outside to explore and see what's going on with the Gallium immortal beasts. If it's a group of Gallium immortal beasts, we have to plan early." Chapter 45-23. Shu Ji, I'll go with you. When Fairy Xing Yu heard this, she could no longer sit still. She hurriedly stood up and said, "I'm worried if you go alone. I can avoid the flying crane immortal beast without using my immortal qi. You'd better cultivate here." Of course, Shu Ji didn't want Fairy Xing Yu to follow him. Fairy Xing Yu said again, "I don't need to cultivate with my injuries. Moreover, your injuries are more serious than mine. Why don't you go with me? We can take care of each other. Besides, if the flying crane immortal beast comes, I won't be able to resist it. Oh, and if I go with you, I can also explore the exit to the meteor belt, right?" But Shu Ji looked at Xiao Hua, who was lying on the ground, and said, "If we all leave, what will happen to Xiao Hua? Didn't you see that he could kill the flying crane immortal beast?" "Oh, right, Xiao Hua, how did you kill the flying crane immortal beast?" Fairy Xing Yu suddenly remembered and hurriedly asked. Xiao Hua was sweating profusely. He thought that Fairy Xing Yu would ask this question first, but when they were about to leave, he remembered such an important matter. Xiao Hua pretended not to frown and said, "It was just a coincidence. When I saw that the flying crane immortal beast was a fire-type immortal beast, I thought of killing it with a water-type immortal artifact. However, I couldn't take out my immortal artifact, so I simply looked around the hall for immortal artifacts. I couldn't use the ones that were too big, and I couldn't use the ones that needed immortal qi. I just happened to see an ice-type flying fork. The size was just right. I took it to protect myself. I also tried to use the flying fork to pierce the flying crane immortal beast's body, but I couldn't get close to the flying crane immortal beast. In the end, when the flying crane immortal beast was about to swallow me, I had a flash of inspiration and threw the flying fork into the flying crane immortal beast's mouth." Xiao Hua shrugged when he spoke up to this point. However, the pain in his body caused him to frown again. He said with difficulty, "Senior, you saw it too. The flying kite immortal beast was accidentally killed by me just like that. Well, fire and water are incompatible. I've also thought about using an ice attribute immortal artifact to kill the kite immortal beast." Shu Ji nodded. "But the immortal artifact I found wasn't as powerful as Xiao Hua's flying fork. It could only injure the flying crane immortal beasts and wasn't able to kill them. This junior found the flying fork there. Senior, do you have another look to see if there's anything suitable?" Xiao Hua said as he pointed towards the distant main hall. Shu Ji shook his head. "That won't be necessary." Fairy Xing Yu stood up and said, "Let's take a look. Maybe there are some high-grade immortal artifact." "Alright, go ahead and look for it." As he spoke, Shu Ji looked around once more, and then he pointed towards the distance and said, "Xiao Hua, there's a small hall over there. I presume the flying crane immortal beast is unable to enter. Alas, forget it, I'll take you there." As he spoke, Shu Ji rolled up his sleeves and lifted Xiao Hua into the air. Just as he was about to fly away, Fairy Xingyu, who was next to him, said in surprise, Shuji, come and take a look. These celestial artifacts are all compatible. They are similar to the flying fork that Xiao Hua mentioned. Shuji didn't mind. He had already tried it before and felt that Xiao Hua was just lucky. Now that he heard Fairy Xingyu mention it, he said, take them first. I'll send Xiao Hua over, and then we'll go out and explore. Okay. Fairy Xingyu put away the immortal artifacts that Xiao Hua had sealed with innate primordial water and took a few more. Then, she urged her figure to catch up with Shuji. However, just as she was about to leave the main hall, she glanced at the courtyard again and whispered to herself, is there someone else in this heavenly mansion? But if there's someone else, why didn't I notice it? Maybe it's just an illusion? In just a moment, Shuji and Fairy Xingyu both rushed out of the heavenly mansion and went far away. After half a cup of tea's time, Xiao Hua flew out from the main hall while humming a little tune. He shouted loudly, Xiao Guo, master. Xiao Guo was really frightened. Her face was still pale as she looked around, her eyes darting around. It's okay. That damn flying crane immortal beast has been killed by master. Xiao Hua said with a smile, hurry up and take these immortal herbs and immortal wood. There's still a fairy. Xiao Guo hurriedly said, she seemed to have noticed me just now. Oh, really? That's a little troublesome. Xiao Hua frowned, but after a moment, he smiled and said, don't worry about her. Just take them. Even if she found out, she could only be suspicious. Otherwise, she would have said that when she came back, she would push everything to the flying crane immortal beast. What does that have to do with us? Okay. Xiao Guo was emboldened when she heard this. She handed a storage bag to Xiao Hua and said, I just put this away. Master, take it first. I'll tidy it up when I get home. Xiao Hua took it and put it into the space without looking at it. However, after a moment, he asked curiously, Xiao Guo, can you use storage bags here? Yes, master knows. This storage bag is not the same as the one master uses. It was refined by Master Lei Ting using immortal wood. Xiao Guo hurriedly answered. Hehe, so that's how it is. Xiao Hua laughed and waved his hand. You still have a lot of these things, right? Yes, master. Xiao Guo smiled and said, enough to take away all the immortal herbs and immortal wood in the main hall. Good. Xiao Hua waved his hand heroically. Go ahead and do it. You and master will work hard together. Move this heavenly mansion into our house and let our Fortune Gate disciples enjoy it. Yes, I understand. Xiao Guo's face lit up when she heard that she could work hard together with Xiao Hua. She was really excited. She slipped into the ground and disappeared. Then, Xiao Hua saw that inside the courtyard, large patches of immortal herbs were disappearing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Since he had already made up his mind to empty the heavenly abode, Xiao Hua no longer held back. Activating his soul power, he flew up and went along the side of the main hall. Wherever Xiao Hua passed, the armors and immortal tools disappeared. The decorations and jades in the main hall also disappeared. Only broken corpses and collapsed stone walls were blown by the wind under the sunlight, as if they were howling in grief. The Night Dome Heavenly Mansion was really big. There were all kinds of halls in an endless line. Even inside the halls, there were often secret rooms. However, all these secrets were exposed after the entire Heavenly Mansion's restrictions were destroyed. Xiao Hua released his soul force to the limit and didn't miss a single spot. His mind, which could even absorb the netherworld blood sea into the space, tirelessly searched the Heavenly Mansion. He didn't miss a single immortal tool. Even so, Xiao Hua flew for more than 10 hours before he finished walking through the entire Heavenly Mansion. Finally, he completed his task and moved all the things in the Night Dome Heavenly Mansion into the space. Xiao Hua was tired, but Xiao Guo was even more tired than him. Xiao Hua still had some misgivings. He didn't dare to take things that were too broken, and he didn't dare to take things that were too obvious. He was afraid that Shuji and Fairy Xingyu would find flaws when they returned. Xiao Guo, on the other hand, didn't have any misgivings. She took all the immortal herbs, immortal fruits, and immortal wood in the Heavenly Mansion into the space. Not a single one was left out. At this time, Xiao Guo had already returned to the space. She looked at the immortal fruits and immortal herbs with some worry. She could clearly feel that the heaven and earth origin energy of Shenhua continent was very different from the immortal spirit energy in the space fragment. She couldn't guarantee that these immortal herbs would survive well after being planted. Maybe the aura of that medicinal pill. Xiao Guo suddenly thought of the mysterious medicinal pill that had appeared in the space before. That medicinal pill had disappeared from Shenhua continent ever since Xiao Hua's space evolved. Naturally, Xiao Guo hadn't seen it for a long time. However, she had already obtained a lot of alchemy techniques from that medicinal pill. Xiao Guo hadn't completely mastered the alchemy techniques yet. At this time, when Xiao Guo saw these immortal woods, she naturally associated them with the aura of the mysterious gold core. Xiao Hua naturally didn't know about Xiao Guo's distress. He casually strolled around and finally arrived at a majestic hall. There were many things in this hall, but as soon as Xiao Hua entered the hall, his gaze was immediately attracted to a throne in the hall. Although this throne seemed to have been split into two halves by a sword, it seemed to be hidden in the void and also seemed to be towering over the throne. A kind of unforgettable will emerged from this throne. This will was like the center of the heavenly palace, making Xiao Hua feel that it was difficult to approach. When his gaze landed on it, it was as if he was looking at an incomparably huge mountain. Xiao Hua had never seen Immortal Emperor Go Chen's throne, nor had he seen Mahavira-Khanna's 9-grade lotus platform. However, he had seen the dragon thrones of the dragon palaces of the 4 seas. Those 4 dragon thrones added together were probably not comparable to the jewel on this throne. Since even Shuji and Fairy Xingyue could not get close to the throne, Xiao Hua naturally could not. Xiao Hua shifted his gaze away from the throne and looked at the plaque on the jade wall behind the throne. The plaque was already in tatters, and the dazzling words on it were not something Xiao Hua could understand. When his gaze landed on it, the words had already turned into a dazzling color that did not form a word. Damn it, isn't it just a celestial venerable? How can you bully people like this? Look at the name of the heavenly mansion. What's there to be afraid of? It's not like I'll lose a single hair. Xiao Hua curled his lips and muttered to himself, moreover, your entire heavenly mansion has been moved away by someone. Thinking about this, Xiao Hua couldn't help but cover his mouth and laugh. Wasn't this person talking about himself? Then, Xiao Hua decided to go all the way. He released his consciousness again and collected all the inconspicuous things in the hall. He believed that even if Shuji and Fairy Xingyu came back, they might not be able to find anything. Xiao Hua had absolute confidence in this aspect. After cleaning the hall, Xiao Hua turned around and prepared to leave. However, just as he turned around, his gaze fell on the milky white plaque unwillingly. He pinched his chin, and there was a little embarrassment in his eyes. It seemed that he was angry because he couldn't move the entire hall away. After a while, Xiao Hua raised his right hand and pointed his thumb between his eyebrows. He whispered, "Open." A dark green brilliance flashed between his eyebrows, and the delusion breaker Dharma eye opened. Then, Xiao Hua sucked in a breath of cold air. Hiss. P.S. Thank you for your support, fellow Daoist Benben. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please come to Chijian to vote, recommend, collect, and reward. Thank you for all forms of support. Chapter 45-24. Through the delirium breaker Dharma eye, Xiao Hua saw a layer of dazzling brilliance on the huge throne. A light shadow that looked like a huge hammer that had been split in half was faintly flashing in the void. The halo pierced the Dharma eye like a golden needle, causing Xiao Hua's Dharma eye to feel pain. He couldn't help but sigh. This throne is really powerful. However, before Xiao Hua could raise his Dharma eye to look at the words on the plaque, he was suddenly stunned again. He stood there in disbelief and then hurriedly closed his Dharma eye. When the soreness in his Dharma eye slowly disappeared, he took a few steps forward, wanting to get closer to the throne. Unfortunately, he only took 2 steps before the invisible aura of the throne blocked him. Xiao Hua walked around the throne again, but he still couldn't get close to it. When he reached the side of the hall, Xiao Hua opened his Dharma eye again. Sure enough, at the bottom of the throne that looked like a hammer, a golden square light shadow the size of a fist appeared in his eyes. This light shadow was like a candle flame in the wind, flattened and swaying for a while. Most of the time, it was covered by the light of the throne. If not for the delirium breaker Dharma eye, he definitely wouldn't have been able to see it. Imperial Jade Seal. Golden Seal. Seeing the light shadow instantly fill up and become a square body, Xiao Hua suddenly came to his senses and thought of the Imperial Jade Seal and Golden Seal he had obtained from the two corpses. Damn it. Xiao Hua was a little hesitant. After all, so much time had passed. Shuji and Fairy Xingyu could come back at any time. Moreover, if he took out the Imperial Jade Seal and Golden Seal, who knew what kind of aura or abnormality there would be? If he accidentally fell into the trap, wouldn't everything before be for naught? I'd better go. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and said to himself, this is the Yi Qiong heavenly abode. Although Fairy Xingyu and Shuji didn't say which big shot lived here, looking at the extravagance of this heavenly abode, it's not an ordinary immortal. I'd better. Thoughts were just thoughts. If the moneygrubber Xiao Hua stopped now, he wouldn't be Xiao Hua. After hesitating for a moment, Xiao Hua observed the light shadow again. Fortunately, there were still some differences between the Imperial Jade Seal and the Golden Seal. In a moment, Xiao Hua already knew that the owner of the Imperial Jade Seal was the owner of this heavenly abode. Therefore, Xiao Hua first released his soul sense to check if there were any strange movements nearby, then hurriedly took out the Imperial Jade Seal. As soon as the Imperial Jade Seal appeared, it immediately emitted a milky white halo. This halo also took the shape of a hammer. Xiao Hua held the Imperial Jade Seal, and the halo blocked the aura of the throne. Xiao Hua effortlessly walked to the front of the throne. The shadow of the Imperial Jade Seal was below the throne. Although the throne was split into two, Xiao Hua was still unable to move the throne away. Xiao Hua released his consciousness. The entire throne was heavier than a mountain, and he couldn't collect it. Xiao Hua looked again. The right hand of the throne was on a square shelf. Xiao Hua did not hesitate to place the Imperial Jade Seal on the shelf. Shua. As the Imperial Jade Seal fell, a milky white brilliance immediately emerged from the throne, spreading all around the heavenly abode. Although Xiao Hua couldn't see it clearly, he could sense that layers upon layers of profound restrictions were slowly being activated, and the entire heavenly abode began to slowly shake. Mother****. Xiao Hua panicked and shouted, I didn't want to activate the restrictions of the heavenly abode. With this, no matter how stupid Shuji and Fairy Xingyu are, they will know that I did something. Helpless, Xiao Hua hurriedly released his consciousness to put the throne back into the space. Unfortunately, the throne was still as steady as a mountain, not moving at all. Xiao Hua was helpless. He hastily picked up the Imperial Jade Seal again. Strangely, when he picked up the Imperial Jade Seal again, swoosh. The Imperial Jade Seal glowed brilliantly and landed on the throne. The enormous throne immediately transformed into a ray of light and shadow. Following Xiao Hua's silent chant, receive, 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 it fell into the Imperial Jade Seal. With the throne gone, only an empty space was left. Naturally, the naked eye still couldn't see the shadow of the Imperial Jade Seal. Xiao Hua opened his delirium eyes and looked at the shadow, waiting for the shadow to fill up into the shape of the Imperial Jade Seal again. At the same time, he was burning with anxiety. His soul sense swept the surroundings of the heavenly abode, fearing that Shuji and Fairy Xingyu would return at this time. In just half a cup of tea's time, in Xiao Hua's eyes, a day passed like a year. Seeing the shadow gradually take shape, Xiao Hua didn't hesitate to put the Imperial Jade Seal in the shadow. Boom! At the place where the Imperial Jade Seal landed, the light and shadow suddenly exploded. It was as if a huge hammer had filled the entire hall. Xiao Hua's lower eye seemed to have been pierced by a sharp sword. A burst of intense pain came, causing him to hastily close his eyes. When he opened his eyes, he saw a bright light like the scorching sun in front of him. Layers of brilliance shone out from a door in front of him. Under the brilliance of this light, his body became transparent. Since he had already reached this point and made such a big movement, Xiao Hua didn't have time to regret it. He stepped into the door. Heavens! Xiao Hua, who had always expressed his surprise with Holy Sha *T, actually shouted Holy Sha *T now. These two words were enough to express his feelings. Because, just inside this door, there was another huge space. Inside the space, there were many armors, immortal weapons, war chariots, and other things neatly arranged. Moreover, in places that were almost impossible to see, there were even more things that Xiao Hua didn't recognize at all. At this time, other than shock, Xiao Hua only had one thought: Holy Sha *T, before. I really worked for nothing. More than dozens of hours of work, I might as well have found this space. The ancients said it well: as long as the direction is right, the sweat won't be in vain. The ancients really didn't deceive me. At this time, ka. A sound like glass cracking came from the top of Xiao Hua's head. Xiao Hua hurriedly looked up and saw that outside the milky white space, layers of dragon-like cracks flashed from time to time. And in these cracks, Xiao Hua was very familiar with the fluctuations of space collapsing violently rushed in. Not good. Xiao Hua immediately thought of the annihilation of space when he met the first Tianxin in the Dawn Rain continent. This space itself is inside the Heavenly Palace, and the fragment of the immortal realm where the Heavenly Palace is located is separated from the immortal realm. Now that it has fallen into the meteor belt, this space naturally can't exist forever. If this Xiao didn't happen to come in today, I'm afraid that after this space was annihilated, everything inside would no longer exist. Collect. Xiao Hua saw that there wasn't much time left and hurriedly released his mind to collect the things inside the space. However, when Xiao Hua's mind looked again, this space seemed to be limitless, but his mind was already unable to keep up with the speed of the space collapsing. He saw that a corner of the space had already collapsed. Imperial Jade Seal. Xiao Hua's mind was blessed. He hurriedly waved his hand and the Imperial Jade Seal floating not far away fell into his hand. Collect. Xiao Hua almost couldn't wait to shout loudly. Shua. The Imperial Jade Seal didn't disappoint Xiao Hua. A brilliance fell into the space. When the brilliance disappeared, the space was already completely empty. Awesome. Xiao Hua slapped his thigh and hurriedly sent his mind to collect the Imperial Jade Seal back into the space. Only then did he feel completely relieved. Rumble. At this time, the space above Xiao Hua's head had already collapsed, letting out a thunderous sound. However, the space collapse this time was different from before. After the space vortex, there wasn't a chaotic void, but a starry sky. There were many space fragments in the starry sky, and these fragments were wantonly fluttering all the time. These fragments had a faint brilliance. Some were in the shape of strips, some were in the shape of squares, some were in the shape of 6 stars, and most of the fragments didn't have any fixed shape. For a while, they were in the shape of a circle, and for a while, they were in the shape of a sheet. Isn't this a meteor belt? Xiao Hua was dumbfounded. However, in an instant, Xiao Hua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Obviously, the exit of the space fragment that Fairy Xingyu couldn't find with her star shuttle was here. It was the place that was blocked by the hidden space of the heavenly mansion. Shuji had said clearly before that the exit of the space fragment could be anywhere in the space fragment. It could be at the top of a mountain, at the bottom of the sea, in the forest, or in the pavilion. And the exit of the immortal realm fragment was in the space that was suppressed by the throne. If Xiao Hua hadn't taken the Heavenly Master's Imperial Jade Seal, if he hadn't taken the throne, and if he hadn't used the Imperial Jade Seal to open this hidden space, even if the hidden space that blocked the exit collapsed, the exit would still be suppressed by the throne. Even if Shuji and Fairy Xingyu racked their brains, they wouldn't be able to find the exit of this space fragment. Seeing the meteor belt appear, Xiao Hua's first reaction was to open his Delirium Dharma Eye. Although the Delirium Dharma Eye was in severe pain at this time, Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent when it concerned his life. A moment later, the space collapsed to the door. Catcher! With a cracking sound, the door cracked open. Xiao Hua closed his Dharma Eye and flew out of the door. When he looked at the hall again, more than half of the jade wall with the plaque had fallen into the void, and the entire hall was still disappearing rapidly. Oh, my hall! Xiao Hua cried out involuntarily. He immediately released his consciousness and wantonly put everything in the hall into the space. At this time, seeing that the space collapse was about to swallow the entire heavenly palace, wasn't it a good time for Xiao Hua to destroy the corpse and destroy the evidence? What other scruples did he have? Soon, the heavenly palace began to disappear from the center, and a meteor belt appeared clearly. However, the speed of the space collapse didn't slow down at all. Not only did it spread into the depths of the heavenly palace, it also spread out of the heavenly palace. Xiao Hua's initial joy began to turn into fear. He released his soul consciousness and flew out of the heavenly palace. The aura of the space collapse began to rush out of the heavenly palace and spread throughout the entire space. Xiao Hua flew out of the heavenly palace, flew up a high slope, and stood there quietly. His gaze fell on what seemed to be the location of the heavenly palace. At this time, the center of the heavenly palace had become an oval-shaped starry sky, and the surrounding edges were rapidly becoming transparent and disappearing. Moreover, this oval-shaped starry sky also extended in all directions, like a big mouth of starry sky, swallowing the space fragment. Chapter 45-25. Roar, roar. A burst of extremely chaotic cries came from afar. Clearly, the huge commotion in the heavenly palace had attracted the attention of the flying crane immortal beasts. Hearing the many cries, Xiao Hua was already prepared in his heart, but, when he turned around and saw thousands of flying crane immortal beasts, he was completely dumbfounded. How was this still the rhythm of letting people live? At this moment, a voice that sounded calm yet was filled with anxiety sounded out from in front of the group of flying crane immortal beasts. Xiao Hua, quickly find a suitable spatial fragment. Xiao Hua came back to his senses and looked over. He saw that in front of the ferocious flying dagger immortal beasts, there was actually a flying boat. Shuji and Fairy Xingyue were standing on it. Behind the two of them, there were many figures. However, Xiao Hua could hear Shuji's voice clearly. Okay. Xiao Hua responded and was about to fly up. His heart skipped a beat. He withdrew his soul power and ran down the mountain. Although he looked vigorous, he was still far from flying. Senior. Xiao Hua acted very well. He raised his head and shouted, "I can't fly. Come and pick me up." Of course, Xiao Hua did not use his soul power when he shouted. As for whether Shuji could hear him, only God knew. Shuji could not hear what Xiao Hua was saying, but he already understood when he saw Xiao Hua dancing on the hillside. Shuji turned to Fairy Xingyu and said, "Xingyu, get ready to activate the star shuttle and find a suitable spatial fragment." Yes. Fairy Xingyu raised her hand and took out her star shuttle. However, when she was about to activate her immortal spiritual energy, she smiled bitterly and said in a low voice, "I've already used up too much immortal spiritual energy when I fought the flying crane immortal beast earlier. I can't even activate the star shuttle now." Okay. Shuji nodded. He looked up at the meteor belt in the distance and said, "You can use your experience to find a spatial fragment to enter first. I'll go and save Xiao Hua first." Okay. Fairy Xingyu nodded. She looked down at the flying boat under her feet and said, "With the Dongfang family's celestial imperial equipment, we will have some assurance when we enter the meteor belt. As long as there is no celestial kite beast in the space fragments that fall, there shouldn't be any problems." Dongfang Yushan. Shuji did not say anything more to Fairy Xingyue. He turned his head and said to a Confucian cultivator standing respectfully in the distance, "You will control the flying boat for me." This. Dongfang Yushan was a little hesitant. At this moment, the flying boat shook violently, and sparks appeared at the tail of the flying boat. It was the flying crane immortal beast's fire pillar that hit the flying boat. Junior's true chi is limited and my cultivation is shallow. It is difficult for me to control this imperial equipment. Dongfang Yushan no longer hesitated and said loudly, "Moreover, there are so many immortal beasts chasing after the flying boat. If the flying boat is even a moment slower, we will all die. If I tell you to activate it, then activate it. Why are you spouting so much nonsense?" Shuji's tone was indifferent as he glanced at Dongfang Yushan. Dongfang Yushan's heart trembled. He hurriedly stepped forward and said, Yes, I understand. I will ask Shimon Hangyue and the other disciples to come and help. As you wish. Shuji nodded. Then, he released his thought and looked at Xiao Hua. When Xiao Hua saw the flying boat approaching, he raised his arms and waved them. At the same time, he pointed at the meteor belt. Shuji curled his lips. He naturally understood that Xiao Hua was indicating his importance and reminding him not to abandon him here. Shuji turned his head to look at the approaching celestial kite beast, then looked down at the flying boat. He nodded at Fairy Xingyu. His whole body glowed with silver light again, and his figure turned into a thunderbolt and rushed down the flying boat. When Dongfang Yushan, Shimon Hangyue, and the other disciples of the four great families saw the silver light flashing on Shuji's body and the immortal's pressure, there was not much surprise in their eyes. They only had one thought in their minds, and that was to report to their sects as soon as they returned from Star Moon Palace. On these 3 continents, there were immortals from the immortal world, and there was more than one immortal. Shuji descended from the flying boat, turning into an arc in the sky as he flew towards Xiao Hua. Seeing that he was still several hundred feet away, Shuji raised his hand and made a grabbing motion. Catcher! A layer of blue lightning appeared in the void around Xiao Hua. This lightning was like a giant hand, grabbing Xiao Hua in an instant. Then, Shuji's figure flashed, and he charged towards the sky again. In just a moment, the flying boat in the sky had already passed over Shuji's head. Shuji and Xiao Hua were exposed in front of thousands of celestial kite beasts again. Aogg! The strange cries of the celestial kite beasts not only caused Shuji's figure to sway slightly, but even Xiao Hua's Niwen Palace was filled with sparks. Woo woo! Following the cries of the celestial kite beasts, hundreds of fire pillars fell from the sky. Before the fire pillars could get close, the space where Xiao Hua was already filled with an inexplicable sticky liquid. The space was about to collapse from the heat. Seeing this, Xiao Hua's liver and gallbladder were torn apart. He knew in his heart that even if he used all his soul power at this time, he would not be able to escape from this large-scale attack. Roar! At this moment of life and death, he heard Shuji's roar and the silver light around him shone brightly. Xiao Hua felt a strong force in the air near him. Then, the entire space was like a wave crashing toward him. His figure flashed and landed on the flying boat. Shuji! Before Xiao Hua could stabilize himself, Fairy Xingyu's voice sounded, her tone full of panic. It's okay. Although Shuji's voice was weak, he was very calm. Because the flying boat was attacked by the celestial kite beasts one after another, the Confucian cultivators, who were flustered, immediately calmed down. Listen to Xiao Hua. After Shuji finished speaking, he took out a pill from his arms and put it in his mouth. He did not say anything else. Looking at the silver light again, he saw blood with black flesh flowing out. Xiao Hua stood on the flying boat and stabilized himself slightly. He immediately said to Fairy Xingyu, Senior, don't worry about the meteor belt. You go and control the flying boat. We will fly out of the space fragment first. Okay. Although Fairy Xingyu was worried about Shuji, she could not do anything when she saw Shuji healing himself. She agreed and flew to where Dongfang Yushan and the others were and replaced them. Disciples of aristocratic families. Xiao Hua looked at Dongfang Yushan and the others and said, You must have some secret techniques that can be used here. Now, there is no need to hold back. Take them out. Go to the stern and block the celestial kite beast. Dongfang Yushan and the others looked at each other and nodded. Yes, Senior. Then, Xiao Hua walked to the front of the flying boat and opened his delusion breaker Dharma eye to take a closer look. Previously, under the attacks of the celestial kite beasts, the defense of the stern of the flying boat had been broken, and the entire flying boat was shaking. At this time, Fairy Xingyu stabilized the flying boat. Although its speed did not increase, with the help of many Confucian cultivators, the flying boat finally stabilized. Senior, that triangular fragment. Xiao Hua looked at it for a few seconds and pointed to a space fragment in the middle of the distance without hesitation. Fairy Xingyu was slightly stunned. She said in a low voice, Xiao Hua, according to my previous experience, the oval-shaped space fragment furthest away is the most suitable. Then there is the linear fragment on the left. That triangular fragment. Although the distance is suitable, it is the most dangerous one. We are all seriously injured now. We can't take the risk. Senior, listen to me. Although Xiao Hua said senior, his tone was unquestionable. He replied without hesitation. Fairy Xingyu frowned and reminded him, Xiao Hua, I know you can see some clues, but I also have a magical power that you don't know about. I think the oval-shaped fragment is the best. Senior Shu said to listen to me. Xiao Hua's tone was firm. There was no room for negotiation. Fairy Xingyu glanced at Shu Ji, who was sitting in the distance, and her heart ached. She instantly understood why Shu Ji had not let her control the flying boat when he had come out, and why he had not let the Confucian cultivators of the Dongfang family go to the stern to resist the celestial kite beasts. Forget it. At most, I will die here. Fairy Xingyu was a little sad. She thought to herself, when I encountered the thousands of celestial kite beasts, didn't I also want to die? Now that this meteor belt has inexplicably appeared, I have a chance of survival. Why should I be so stubborn? After Fairy Xingyu admitted defeat, the flying boat began to adjust its direction. Although Xiao Hua did not look at Fairy Xingyu, he raised his eyebrows slightly when he saw the flying boat adjust its direction. He was a little surprised, because he was still waiting for Fairy Xingyu to get angry. At this time, the huge heavenly mansion had completely disappeared. The whole earth seemed to have been torn apart by a big hand. Moreover, the tearing force of this big hand was getting stronger, and the speed of the earth cracking was getting faster. Seeing a faint golden light appear in his Dharma eye, Xiao Hua understood that the golden light was the boundary of this space fragment. As long as the flying boat rushed out of this boundary, it would be considered as completely escaping from this murderous fragment of the immortal realm. Boom! At this time, the flying boat shook violently again. More than a dozen celestial kite beasts broke through the attacks of the Confucian cultivators and directly attacked the flying boat. Senior. Xiao Hua was anxious. Put in more effort. It's easy for you to say that. Fairy Xingyu glared at Xiao Hua and said, You hid in the heavenly mansion to rest. I fought my way back with Shu Ji. Yes, yes. Senior, you have worked hard. Xiao Hua said with a smile, Aren't we at the end? We are just one step away. What are you talking about? Is this how you talk to your senior? Fairy Xingyu seemed to be a little angry. Xiao Hua suddenly realized that it was inappropriate to say this in front of Fairy Xingyu. He unconsciously stuck out his tongue and did not dare to say anything more. Awoo! At this time, the cries of two celestial kite beasts sounded from both sides of the flying boat. Fairy Xingyu was shocked and did not dare to say anything more to Xiao Hua. She hurriedly urged the flying boat to rush into the ground. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.